us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
The US kills the leader of Al-Qaeda.
Very good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Tuesday, the 2nd of August. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel Webster and Mark Longhurst. And here's what's leading the news this morning.
The leader of Al-Qaeda, Eamonn al-Zawahiri, has been killed in a drone strike in Afghanistan. President Joe has confirmed it overnight, saying Zawahiri, who took over Al-Qaeda after the death of Osama bin Laden, was one of the key plotters of the September the 11th attacks.
Here, the former leadership rival Penny Mordaunt has backed Liz Truss for Prime Minister. The announcement came ahead of a hustings last night in Exeter in which Truss and her rival Rishi Sunak faced questions again over policing, tax and migration.
And the Court of Appeal has refused to postpone the ending of life support for Archie Battersby beyond midday today. The 12-year-old's mother has said that she will fight to the end, vowing to take the case to the UK's highest court.
And don't forget, you can join any of our discussions this morning by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews. So the leader of Al-Qaeda, Eamonn al-Zawahiri, has been killed in a drone strike that's been confirmed by the US government.
Speaking in Washington, President Joe Biden had this to say.
On Saturday, at my direction, the United States successfully concluded an airstrike in Kabul, Afghanistan, that killed the emir of Al-Qaeda, Eamonn al-Zawahiri. Now, justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more.
Well, that was President Biden speaking in Washington. Joining us now, Jamil and Jaffa, a former defence and intelligence advisor to President George W. Bush. Good morning to you. We know that Washington was warned that pulling out of Afghanistan could form this safe haven, as they said, for terrorists. It seems that that warning was correct.
Well, good morning, Mark. And yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, obviously, Eamonn al-Zawahiri felt comfortable enough that he could return to Kabul, Afghanistan, bring his wife, bring his children. Luckily enough, the U.S. Were able to follow his children and his wife to his hideout, his safe house, determine a pattern of life. They've been watching him since about April, determined that he would be out on his balcony every so often, and ultimately take a shot with 2 Hellfire missiles and take him out.
Tell us a little bit about the man and why this was such a significant win, not just for President Biden, for the States, but I suppose for the West.
Sure. Well, look, Ayman al-Zawahiri, long a terrorist, long before Osama bin Laden. He had founded the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, was involved in the plot to assassinate an Egyptian president, and ultimately in 1996 joined hands with Osama bin Laden in their worldwide declaration of jihad against crusaders and infidels, the ultimate creation of al-Qaeda that led to the terrorist attacks of 9/11 that he and bin Laden plotted together. After bin Laden was killed in 2011 by a U.S. counterterrorism attack in Pakistan, Ayman al-Zawahiri became the #1 leader of al-Qaeda, a position he's held for the last decade. And now, at long last, after we've taken out a number of the #3s and #2s in al-Qaeda, we've now taken out the leader. To be sure, al-Qaeda will try to regroup and will appoint a new leader, probably Sirajuddin Haqqani, a member of the Afghan government and the former head of the Haqqani network. But al-Qaeda, for now at least, is been worn down. They will come back, though, and the key is to keep the pressure on them, both in the United States to prevent attacks in the United States, but also against our allies in the UK and Europe.
Surprised that he was found in Kabul. We were always told that Al-Qaeda and the Taliban were the worst of enemies.
Well, you know, they are enemies in the sense that al-Qaeda and the Taliban have fought at times. That being said, it's worth remembering that the Taliban did host Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda on the 9/11 attacks and refused to hand him over and ultimately succumbed to the conflict with the United States. They've returned to power. It's no surprise with the Haqqani back in the government that al-Qaeda is back in the game and back in Kabul. This was an expected thing. The president did say that we would continue to conduct counterterrorism operations. He deserves credit for that. That being said, this is not an example of the over-the-horizon counterterrorism strategy succeeding. That still remains to be seen, whether we can effectively carry that out over the long run without boots on the ground and without intelligence forces and the like present in Kabul and the rest of Afghanistan.
Amazing feat of technology that a drone strike was able to do this. A huge bounty on his head, $25 million US. But I wonder, do you think this morning, is the world a safer place? I mean, as you described, there have been tensions between al-Qaeda and, of course, the Taliban in Afghanistan. Will they now be upset about US involvement in Afghanistan again in some way? Also, will we see some sort of proliferation now of al-Qaeda now that their figurehead has gone?
Well, the Taliban government has argued that this is a breach of the agreement the U.S. had with the Taliban by taking a strike inside of Afghanistan. Of course, we've said that they're in violation of the agreement by allowing al-Qaeda to be operating out of Kabul. And so there's a dispute about what the agreement means. That being said, at least in the short run, al-Qaeda is likely to go down and regroup. That being said, they may try to provoke inspired attacks by Westerners, folks in Europe, folks in Great Britain, folks in the United States who wanted to conduct attacks and maybe doing them inspired by al-Qaeda. So we may see an uptick in the short run in response to this attack. And in the long run, there's no doubt that al-Qaeda will continue to try to operate through its affiliates, through its franchisees, and to continue to try and conduct large-scale attacks against the West, against Americans, against all of Europeans and the rest of the West across the globe. And so we need to get the pressure on al-Qaeda. We need to also understand that ISIS itself is also another threat, separate and apart from al-Qaeda. We need to continue to combat both of them aggressively.
And Jamil, another thought, just to switch back to domestic politics. How important now is this for President Joe Biden? Of course, he's really been tanking in the various polls, and questions about his own position with another bout of COVID, of course. This will boost his standing, we assume.
Well, there's no doubt that any time the United States has a major military victory or a major counterterrorism success, the president's going to get a benefit from that, and he should. That being said, inflation remains a major challenge. COVID continues to be a challenge around the globe as well as the United States. And at the end of the day, economics are a huge issue. And then, of course, we have the upcoming visit of Speaker Nancy Pelosi to China.
Yeah.
The Biden administration has indicated they don't really want her to go. At the same time, they're going to have to respond to whatever the Chinese do. That may cause additional challenges. So President Biden is in for a tough run as it comes. And with the upcoming elections, both the by-elections here in 2022, but also presidential elections in 24, it's probably an uphill battle for the Democrats and for President Biden.
Sorry, just since you mention it, I'm interested on your own views about this meeting between Pelosi and the Taiwanese. Do you think it is ill-advised given the warnings from the Chinese?
Absolutely not. Speaker Pelosi made clear early on that she planned to go to Taiwan. She should continue that visit. We should not give in to the threats from China. That would be a mistake at this point. And frankly, the Biden administration should have been clear with China up front, saying if an American politician, the number 3 in line of the presidency, wants to visit Taiwan, she will and will protect her doing it. And so now the Chinese perceive that there may be some disagreement within the U.S. government. They may try to exploit that and may make a strategic miscalculation, because at the end of the day, the Biden administration can and will have to defend and protect Nancy Pelosi. So the Chinese should make no mistake about it. They can't threaten the number 3 in the leadership of the United States.
OK, Jamil Jaffer, former defense advisor to the Bush administration, Washington. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Isabel. Thanks, Mark.
Well, to domestic politics here now. The former leadership candidate Penny Mordaunt backing Liz Truss for leader in the latest blow to Rishi Sunak's campaign.
Yes, Truss remains the frontrunner to win the leadership race after last night's hustings in Exeter, in which she and her rival Rishi Sunak were quizzed on issues of immigration, policing and the union.
Well, let's get more with the assistant editor of Conservative Home, William Atkinson. William, thank you for joining us in the studio. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
What a difference a day makes. Blue-on-blue attacks and the Mordaunt camp talking of dirty tricks. Suddenly they're the best of friends. What's gone on?
It's almost as if Liz Truss is very quickly emerging as the front-runner in this Tory race.
Well.
And Penny Mordaunt's going from complaining about the various attacks on her character and record that Liz Truss's campaign were making but a week or two ago in what now feels like ancient history, is now hoping to get a nice spot at the cabinet table.
Ah, is that what it is? There's something being dangled?
Oh, I imagine so. But also, she said herself, Penny Mordaunt, when she was backing Liz Truss in what was a rather long speech before Liz Truss actually emerged yesterday, she was saying that she was a signpost, basically. She was indicative of where the wind is blowing in this Tory leadership race. Remember, in recent days, Truss has already received the backing of other sort of former leadership candidates, such as Nadeem Zahawi, sorry, it's only, 6:15, the Chancellor, and Tom Tugendhat as well. So I think those who are being able to look at the polls, those who think that the party members are very happily plumping for Truss, sorry, not Trump, again, it's only 6:15, who want to remain essentially as part of the cabinet are going for Truss. But I would say the one thing I would say against that is that this morning we have an interesting poll that's apparently not necessarily commissioned by, but it's at least been shown to the Truss campaign that's on the front page of The Times, which suggests that Sunak is now only 5 points behind Truss in the polls, whereas but a week or two ago he was 24 points behind. Now, this hasn't been publicly published yet, etc. This wasn't directly from the Truss campaign, but it might suggest that the race is tighter than we previously thought.
It's interesting you mentioned The Times. It seems they're pretty much the only right-leaning paper that is supporting the Sunak campaign. The Telegraph this morning coming out on their front page in support and endorsing the Truss campaign. We see, of course, Ginger Spice, Jerry Horner also coming out.
Oh, well, it's all over, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, it's all over. So they're all, piling in behind this Truss, and one wonders, is there any chance that Rishi Sunak might decide to bow out and there could be a coronation?
I think that's unlikely. I think from what I know, having interviewed now both the candidates last week, what I know of both Sunak's sort of commitment to the race personally, but also what his team is saying, they believe this fight is very far from over. CCHQ has introduced this measure for the first time in this leadership race, where members will be able to vote again if they so wish online after submitting their ballots, and whichever vote is cast later will be the one that counts. So Sunak and his team believe that they've got a much better ground game than Truss's campaign. He's been up and down the country meeting apparently sort of 2,000 members last weekend alone. And they believe this race is tighter than the headline polls might suggest. And if we get more polling evidence like what the Times are publishing today, then I would not be surprised if actually we go from thinking this is going to be a Truss coronation to a much tighter battle and say last time round with Boris versus Jeremy Hunt.
That would certainly make things more interesting, wouldn't it, than how it's looking at the moment. Let's bring in our next guest at this point. Kevin Hurley is a former detective chief superintendent at the Met, because one of the issues that was discussed at that hustings in Exeter last night was crime and justice in the UK and all the things that need to be done to tackle serious crime. So give us your views then, if you will, Kevin. What do you think needs to be done, and do you think it's being discussed in the correct way?
Well, whoever's been in charge, the current Conservative government, have knocked 20,000 civilians, 22,000 police officers off the books, and another 20-odd thousand civilian staff. And the issue with the ones that have gone is they are all experienced, well-trained. And although Boris Johnson implemented his scheme to bring in 20,000 new people, they're up to about 13,000 of those. And unfortunately, none of them have any experience. The attrition rate of those is somewhere between 20% and 30% in some forces and as low as 10 in others. What I'm saying is that the damage done is huge to policing in terms of just physical numbers. And of course, that's not the answer. We've closed nearly half the police stations in the country. There's been no proper investment in modern IT. Most of the major training facilities have been closed forever. So you see the police go from one blunder to another due to lack of expertise. And of course, the other concern is that half the magistrates' courts in the country have been closed. There's a large cut being made to the crime and prosecution service, cuts to the prison staff. So criminal justice on the surface looks bad, but then when you understand that nearly 90% of the probation service were also cut, there have been cuts in drug rehabilitation and rehabilitation processes. Whichever Prime Minister comes in, they need to do a big step to reverse all this with a police service that is massively demoralised, has suffered in real terms about a 15% cut in their spending power, notwithstanding what's going on. My whole family, 9 of us have been in the Met Police. The morale has never been lower, and people are looking for an outer if they've got a bit of experience. It's a disaster. Actually.
So is this a problem then of retention rather than recruitment, that people are leaving the service and you can't get that experience back in quickly?
It's a problem, first of all, of having lost all that experience. It's then a problem of the fact that most of the training establishments have gone. For example, all the regional detective training establishments at Hendon, Birmingham, Wakefield, Liverpool and Bristol have all been closed or are a shadow of their former self. Training for inspectors, sergeants, chief inspectors, superintendents, chief officers has been slashed. Bramshill Police Staff College, the British equivalent of Quantico, and once the envy of the world, has been closed. The police service has been hollowed out. Policing isn't just about having people walking around in uniforms, nice as they are. It's much more complex than that. And we are now probably going to take, if there was huge reinvestment, 10 to 15 years to rebuild the police service to where it once was, as well as a collapse in the numbers of magistrates' courts. I mean, cases are taking 2 and 3 years to go to the Crown Court.
Yeah. Well, Kevin,
I want criminal justice is a disaster.
Yeah. Well, listen, Kevin, I want to bring in a GB News viewer now to join you and William as part of this conversation. Jonathan Woodrow joining us on the line. Where are you this morning, Jonathan?
In Loughborough in the East Midlands.
Lovely. Well, very warm welcome to you. When we talk about the Conservative Party, we think of, don't we, the party of law and order. They're talking tough on crime. They're also talking tough on trying to clamp down on policing thought crimes. What's your views on what you've been hearing so far?
Well, I appreciate the complexity of the policing problem. I mean, your previous contributors just outlined all sorts of devastating cuts and lack of resources and things like that. And I know I spoke recently to somebody who's retrained for the police in sort of midlife, and he was telling me some horrendous stories of the sorts of things that the police have to deal with daily, from whether it's knife crime or doing the kinds of things that that your average member of the public doesn't have to deal with, like he was dealing with long-lying corpses and things like that. Very difficult situation. So I appreciate the awful job that these folks have to do, and they do take action in the darker side of life. But I think, I mean, my view is that there's as well as a resourcing issue, there's a general problem with the philosophy of what justice is. And that touches on, you brought up the sort of thought policing thing. I think once upon a time, we had a view of justice where there was a process. And justice was said to be done when, if an allegation was made, evidence was assessed and processed, a verdict of guilty or innocent was reached, and then an outcome that fitted that verdict was made, and it was just if there was if the process was sound. We switched that for a kind of view of social justice, haven't we? And social justice is more concerned with equality of outcome and quite a subjective view of a sense of quality of outcome in somebody's. So we see the police arresting over offences made, and I think this has led to this switch to a social justice view has led to a radical politicising of the police. And I think that's evident in at least three ways. You have arrests for offence. Lawrence Fox has been covering that recently. You have, I mean, the lockdown policing has done nothing, I don't think, to help the public opinion on policing, where the ordinary aspects of human life, which you need to get through illness and pandemic. You need work and economy. You need intergenerational help with the family. You need, I'm a pastor, you need public worship. And those things were policed. And straight from, as it appeared, Boris Johnson's Sunday sermons, if you like. If you remember, he was giving announcements on Sundays. They would become policing policy the next day. And I think the other example of the politicisation of the police is when the Met show up to an incident in a car covered in rainbows and stars. I mean, when somebody knew I was coming on here, they sent me some photos of the latest decor of some of these cars. And it does look like somebody with big red shoes is about to climb out of one of these things.
Well, there's a thought. Thank you for mixing politics and policing, or not, as the case may be. Thank you to both of you. We're just going to go back to William from Conservative Home, because clearly politics and policing is going to be slightly sensitive. And how difficult is this for a Tory party where we had Nadine Dorries retweeting a picture or a mock-up of Rishi Sunak knifing Boris Johnson in the back as Julius Caesar and Brutus?
Yes, I think that was slightly ludicrous of her. I think especially she seems to take it so very personally, the sort of defenestration of Boris Johnson. Yeah. But he was removed because his ministers at various levels had lost confidence with him, and so had his MPs. He wasn't removed because Rishi Sunak was brutal.
But has that stayed with Sunak, that a lot of Conservative grassroots think that he did knife him in the back?
I think polling suggests that anywhere between a quarter to about a third of Tory members feel like that. But I don't think that's necessarily the case across the party, because I just don't think that's how things really went. You know, even, of course, Sunak wasn't even the first person to resign. It was Sajid Javid. But on the policing point, I would say that I think it was polling by Public First last year suggested that over 50% of those who think their local areas have got worse over the last 10 years. So the major driver of that is crime. So whoever is Tory leader, this is one of those issues that perhaps doesn't get enough focus when we're talking about economics or personality, etc. But I think there is a sense in a lot of parts of the country that we do have a problem with crime at the moment that is getting worse, and the Tories need to get a handle on that, or Labour can supplant them as the party of law and order.
And just lastly, interesting, Priti Patel hasn't come out and endorsed anyone, has she? And this area is very much her remit. Yeah. Who do you think she'd be supporting, given that she's been such a Boris loyalist, and we think, reading between the lines, he's a Truss supporter as well? Well, I had a very exciting afternoon yesterday where I had to track the various declarations of lots of previous sort of supporters of lots of different Tory leadership candidates, which was an enlightening, if somewhat tiresome experience. Spill the beans. But I would say the vast bulk of people who said they were going to vote for Priti Patel are now backing Liz Truss.
And I would say that's probably indicative of a direction of travel. I think especially if Truss remains the front runner.
But why hasn't she declared?
Oh, I think she's keeping her powder dry. I think because her record as Home Secretary has caused her essentially to become relatively politically toxic in some parts of the Tory party, whereas also very popular in lots of others. She is seen as a Marmite figure at the moment. And I think if she's thinking from a sort of purely political perspective, she'll want to be able to maximise the time of her declaration to sort of see that she will be able to remain in cabinet. On the other hand, she is a relatively canny politician, and so I think she wants to make sure she plays her cards as well as she can.
OK, William, it's always fascinating to talk to you. William Atkinson, Assistant Editor at Conservative Home. Thank you. OK, the time at 6:22. Let's bring you up to date.
Well, the Tory leader, as we've just been discussing, candidate Liz Truss promising a war on Whitehall waste too if she becomes Prime Minister. The Foreign Secretary pledging a leaner, more efficient civil service, amongst other promises, whilst the other candidate, Rishi Sunak, says his economic plan is one of the most far-reaching initiatives to cut income tax that people have seen, close quotes.
British Airways has reportedly suspended selling short-haul flights from Heathrow for at least a week. The Times reported the airline suspended ticket sales for domestic and European services until and including Monday to comply with Heathrow's cap on passenger numbers.
And hundreds of thousands of people with type 1 diabetes in England will soon have access to a life-changing gadget. There'll be no need for a scan or finger prick test to track their blood sugar levels. Now, NHS England says the new arm tech will send that information to a mobile app at all times. Coming up, we're going through all the papers with Emily Carver and John McTernan, but first, let's get the latest weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a gloomy and in places damp start to the day, a breezy day to come as well, but that breeze coming from the southwest will make it feel humid, and in fact it's going to be a hot day in the southeast. Now, weather fronts have been moving in across northern and central parts of the country overnight, and they'll continue to progress eastwards. They contain a lot of cloud and some heavy rain at first, especially for northern England into North Wales, that continuing through the morning before eventually easing away to the east. Nevertheless, it stays cloudy, it stays breezy, it stays damp in places, particularly northern and western England as well as Wales. Brighter skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a few showers in the far northwest where it will be fairly windy here. But towards the southeast, well, avoiding the rain once again and hot and humid with temperatures reaching the high 20s, even 30 Celsius. Low to mid-20s widely across the rest of the UK. And into Tuesday evening, we keep the cloud, we keep the breeze, and as a result, temperatures aren't going to fall very far on Tuesday night. So a warm, uncomfortable night for sleeping for many. And it will stay damp across northwest Scotland into northern and western England as well as parts of Wales. So we start off Wednesday with temperatures of 18 or 19 Celsius, a lot of cloud cover. Again, a breezy start, risk of gales for exposed parts of northern Scotland first thing. Through the day, an area of, well, showery rain will push across southwest England, South Wales as well, before moving into the Midlands as well as southern counties of England. Not a great deal of rainfall associated with this, and to the far southeast it stays very warm, 28 Celsius. Cooler for Scotland and Northern Ireland, temperatures back towards 18 to 21 Celsius. And Thursday and Friday we'll see that cooler air spread to all parts, but it also turns drier and brighter with just some scattered showers, mainly in the north.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. It's 6:28. Lots more still coming your way this Tuesday morning at 6:45. Our reporter Will Hollis will have all the latest from the Commonwealth Games. It was a really great day yesterday. British gymnasts had a series of wins, lots of gold medals to talk.
Yeah, and lots of more medals up for grabs today as well.
Yeah.
Also coming up in this next hour, Beyoncé agreeing to change the lyrics of one of her new songs over the use of a slur, but is it the right decision? We'll be speaking to a disability charity coming up at 7:45.
And as always, please do get involved in the conversations that we're having this morning. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can use Twitter @gbnews. Now, the parents of Archie Battersby will today appeal to the Supreme Court over the decision not to delay the withdrawal of life-preserving treatment for their brain-damaged child.
Well, you remember yesterday, the Court of Appeal refused to postpone the ending of the life support systems for the 12-year-old beyond midday today. That's despite the urgent request from the United Nations. Well, our London reporter joins us now outside the Supreme Court. Alice, it seems that yet again this is the lawyers and the judges deciding rather than the doctors.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gone down to the wire yet again. I mean, initially it was going to be yesterday at 2 o'clock that Archie Battersby's life machine was going to be switched off. That was extended until midday today because there was a hearing yesterday at the Court of Appeal. And that all came about because we had this very sort of dramatic last-minute intervention from the United Nations, from the Committee for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And they had put a request forward to the British government urging them to postpone removing the life support treatment until they had considered the case. Now, the government then referred the case to the Court of Appeal, but as you were just saying there, yesterday they rejected that and said that not only did they reject it, they also refused permission for the parents of Archie Battersby to appeal to the Supreme Court, the UK's highest court. However, as we understand it, they will still be applying to the Supreme Court today to try and appeal the decision that and the potential postponement to their son's life support machine, which currently stands of being switched off at midday today.
For the Battersby family, and our hearts go out to them, of course. If they are unsuccessful at the Supreme Court, then all legal avenues, I presume, Alice, will have been exhausted at this point, and the doctor's advice will be followed, and that is, as you say, midday today, that life support machine would be switched off.
I think it's almost, I think they have explored so many different legal avenues over the last few months. It's come to the High Court twice. It's gone now to the Court of Appeal. The Supreme Court last week refused to intervene. So it'll be interesting to see if they do intervene now that we've had this request from the United Nations. I mean, the only sort of possible avenue the family could explore is the European Court of Human Rights. But as I understand, they didn't want to go down that route because it was, they were told it would be most likely that it would be refused refused outright because of similarities. So, for example, in the case with Charlie Gard, so that's why they didn't go down the sort of Strasbourg route and they kept it very much within the UK. But yes, I think if there is no hearing today and the Supreme Court rejects their opportunity to appeal, then very sadly for the family, it looks like they've exhausted all possible avenues, and sadly doctors would be legally well within their rights to switch off the life support machine in midday today, which of course would be devastating for the family who've campaigned so hard on this for a number of months on an incredibly difficult situation that I'm sure would be any parent's worst nightmare. And I think that's important to stress that when we've been talking about this, there's been so many twists and turns and legal obstacles, and it's easy to get kind of bogged down in that. But really at the heart of this is a very, very ill young boy and a family who've been fighting for what they believe is right. And of course they're at the hospital fighting to do what they believe is right. And it's an incredibly difficult situation, which has been said by all the judges involved.
Yeah. Alice, are we likely to hear any more from the doctors or the hospital? Because clearly Mum Holly indicated that the letter they got from the health authority on Saturday, I think she used the words, they were talking about what she termed an orchestrated execution.
We're not expecting to hear anything more from the hospital beyond. We did hear a statement from Barts Health NHS Trust, which of course have sort of reiterated how sorry they are about what's happened, and they'll wait to see the results of the Supreme Court. But I think crucially, I mean, doctors have given extensive evidence. As I said, it's gone to the High Court twice. There has been, I've heard a lot of testimonies from doctors there, so I don't think there's any new information we'll necessarily be hearing from doctors.
Yeah.
But as you said, the reference there, the letter that Holly Dance has received was very much a sort of bullet point looking at the way in which effectively medication, the ventilator, all of that will be removed, which is very much not what the family wants. And I think that sort of orchestrated effort was exactly what she didn't want. She's always campaigned that she wants her son to die in a way that is, quote, natural, i.e. not done in a way that there's a specific time given of which everything is to be removed. Although I think it's important to stress on behalf of the hospital, one of the reasons that they are doing this is because they don't want him to die in a way that is, quote, chaotic, i.e., the judge yesterday was saying, he could have organ failure at any minute, he could go into cardiac arrest, there would suddenly be a crash team. That is the kind of chaos that they are keen to avoid. So while it may sound incredibly heartless hearing this midday today that his life support machine will be switched off, there have been a number of steps that the hospital has taken, and I do believe in many respects they are trying to do this in a way that is as peaceful to him as possible. The problem is that's not what the family wants, and so it's of course not something that's peaceful for them at all. Far from it. They say it's an incredibly anxious situation for them.
Yeah, Alice, it was that quote you gave yesterday that doctors were concerned all of this was protracting Archie's death rather than prolonging his life. We'll leave it there, Alice, at the Supreme Court. Thank you very much indeed for that. We'll see you a little bit later on in the programme.
Coming up after the break, we're going through the papers. Emily Carver and John McTernan joining us this morning.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back at 6:37. Let's bring you up to date on the latest headlines this morning.
Well, US officials say that the al-Qaeda leader Eamonn al-Zawahiri has been killed in a CIA drone strike in Afghanistan. The White House calling it a successful counter-terrorism operation. Well, the militant group's founder, Osama bin Laden, you remember, was killed by US forces in Pakistan back in 2011.
As we've just been hearing, Archie Battersby's life support treatment is set to be switched off at midday today. Court of Appeal judges won't allow an appeal against their decision at the Supreme Court, but the 12-year-old's parents say they will fight to stop his ventilator being switched off. Archie's been in a coma since April.
In the politics, former Tory leadership candidate Penny Mordaunt is now backing Liz Truss as the next Prime Minister and party leader, of course. The former rival saying that Truss is the hope candidate in the race against Rishi Sunak. Her endorsement came ahead of a hustings late last night in Exeter, where the candidates faced more questions over policing, tax and migration.
Right, it's that time in the programme when we go through your Tuesday morning newspapers, a whole array of stories, it has to be said, on the front pages this morning. And we're joined to do this from the columnist at Conservative Home, Emily Carver, and the political strategist for BCW Global and a former advisor to Tony Blair, that is John McTernan. Welcome, both of you. Emily, let's start by reflecting a little bit further. They're milking every drop of this success on the Lionesses. This is the front
Celebrations
of many of the papers still this morning. I mean, carrying on celebrating.
I mean, I'm glad to hear I'm not the only one who's a little bit bored. It's fantastic.
It is.
It's fantastic. They won. Brilliant. They beat Germany. Excellent, excellent. But I do think something that is winding me up a little bit is how this seems to be presented as all about, you know, a massive win for feminism, as if we're all still chained to to the kitchen sink or something, like we're in the 60s. You know, the Baroness Sue Campbell of the FA, Director of Women's Football, said, "I hope it gives women and girls real optimism that if they want to do something in life, whatever it is, if they work hard, they're going to achieve it."
Thanks for that.
Girls already think that. You know, what is this? And also, it's not going to stop the fact that but a lot of girls aren't interested in football, and that's OK.
There's another... I mean, Leo Williamson, the captain, said it's not women's football, it's just football, which is an interesting perspective, isn't it?
Too, and also, a lot of people have been using this to slag off the men's team.
Quite rightly, some may say.
But I don't understand it. We should be behind, or, you know, men, women alike, surely?
Yeah.
No?
Well, I mean, I was into it for about 24 hours and I'm quickly losing interest, but I know I'm in the minority when it comes to football. No, I have to say...
World Cup
but this,
next year.
I think probably, shoot me if I'm wrong, dear viewers and listeners, a lot of women may feel the same.
Yeah. John, just a thought, a bit of comment as to why there's been no number 10 reception.
Yes, interesting.
That, you know, normally, like the cricket team that we saw successful, they turned up at number 10 and had a drink and so on.
So when they turned up at number 10, they'd had a drink already.
Oh, right.
And they were bouncing off the corridors, and then they went outside and they played on Leo's play equipment in the garden. Didn't break it, but they played on it. Flintoff swinging on Leo's swing. I could see it from my office. Look, I think normally you'd expect the Prime Minister to have brought in the women's team immediately.
Political capital, of course.
But I get the sense that the PM is as interested in football as Emily is. I just don't think it's his sport, and I think he should probably have been made to bring them in.
Is it because what was his reason? It's a holiday snub, according to the front of the Times. I know he was in Northern Ireland yesterday. Yeah.
We're in a bit of a limbo at the moment, aren't we?
Yeah, he'd have been damned if we had...
Yeah, because he wasn't at Wembley, of course, for the game. He's going on holiday tomorrow, Wednesday, for a week. But I mean, they could have organised it before tomorrow.
Well, he wasn't in Wembley, to be fair, because he had his wedding at the weekend, so he was a little bit tied
That's
up.
more important than the football.
Is he allowed to go on a proper holiday now? You know, because he went...
Probably not.
Oh, that's right, having Cornwall holidays.
That horrible-looking camping trip, didn't he, in the rain, because that's what Prime Ministers have to do to show they're normal.
Yeah, but he had a honeymoon on a quite
he?
exotic boat, yes, in the
Paid for
West
by-
Indies.
Yeah.
Well,
One of his,
yes,
yeah.
we shall see. Anyway.
Speaking of Boris Johnson and his legacy, John, at the front of the eye talking about the narcissist versus the neurotic.
Ooh.
Look, I think he's got a fair point. I think too many MPs spend too much time on Twitter and WhatsApp. If I was in number 10, I'd have been frustrated by this, that what you gather from reading the papers and talking to journalists in the lobby is that they actually WhatsApp MPs. MPs send them back messages. They let journalists in on the secrets they're exchanging with each other, and it's like too much of politics is navel-gazing. And
what, the Westminster bubble, you mean?
Well, you stand back from this and you go, what have they done? Boris Johnson, you know, people have talked about who's the candidate that Labour fear in this leadership election. The candidate we always feared was Boris Johnson, and the Tory party have got rid of him, not the Labour Party. The Tory party have done it. So his frustration, weeks on, like, do people really care about?
And from a Labour point of view, are you licking your lips to see the back of him?
Well, I think he had an ability to reach into other parts. Like, and he's here ranting on about his friends are ranting on about the way that the Red Wall MPs are betraying him. There are MPs, and you do hate it. There are MPs who only get elected because you're leader. There's MPs who were only elected because of Tony Blair being leader. They then decided that they were right, and it was their strength of character, their politics, their character that got them elected. And then they turn on, they bite the hand that fed them. We had it, Boris had it, Liz Truss is going to face it, I suspect. The people who voted her in are going to be angry with her.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a very interesting question, Emily, too. The position of the new leader will be, you're going to be Prime Minister, you've got an election maybe in 18 months' time or less. There was a strategies poll, Redfield and Wilton, I'd never heard of them before, but they are highly regarded. This is looking at Truss versus Sir Keir Starmer, 37% for Truss, 36% for Keir Starmer, and that means Truss up 12% in a fortnight as a potential Prime Minister.
That's general population.
Well, yeah, I mean
Not
this is the whole issue that the criticism was that she wouldn't cut it as Prime Minister, and Boris had all the pizzazz and the showbiz element, but that strategy might be changing.
Well, to be honest, Liz Truss has surprised me. I've listened to her recent hustings, and she's been speaking with no notes. She's been referencing local attributes, local ongoings to the areas that she's in. She's been quite personable. She's been giving decent policy suggestions. Some of them might be considered.
Do you think they're decent?
wild.
I'm interested about that because obviously there's been the big tax debate and we've talked a lot about how you stimulate growth. And I know you're a big fan of tax cuts. But obviously, the sort of most of the MPs were following the views, weren't they, of Rishi Sunak, which was, yes, in time, but not at the moment. It's going to stoke inflation. It's not responsible conservatism.
And where's the money coming from?
Where's the money coming from? The magic money tree?
Yes, but in the meantime, many very high-profile economists have come out to say, and, economists that have influence within the Conservative Party have come out to say that actually Liz Truss is spot on. And you've seen Rishi Sunak lose his credibility with this random 4 points off income tax in 7 years, which is never going to happen because the chances of Rishi Sunak still being Prime Minister, if he is selected in 7 years, is very unlikely. So I think Liz Truss has come across as a more honest candidate, perhaps. But I think this polling probably reflects more the fact that Keir Starmer just doesn't.
Well, whilst we're on the subject of polls, on the front of the Times, there's a private poll which is, according to them, being conducted by the Truss camp, which has Sunak only 5 points behind her, which is interesting. That suggests it's all.
Yeah, Truss 48%, Sunak 43%.
Well, that's exactly what I'd be leaking. I'd want my supporters to not be complacent. The danger for Liz Truss is that she's such a front runner that people don't turn out to vote. She wants people to vote for her now as the ballots are landing in their inboxes or however they receive them. They've got to vote now, and she wants people to feel it's a tight contest and that she's not just a shoo-in. And I think so. Get a bit of energy there for the voters. Get a bit of energy there for her organisers.
Right. Just the significance, though, of what she's concentrating on. I mean, you picked up on the Daily Mail that she's vowing to halt junk food tax. You picked up in The Guardian, John, about slashing Whitehall waste, branded ludicrous. I mean, they're not exactly major issues, are they?
You have to see who is she appealing to.
Right,
She's appealing to people who want to be free. Now, that's not simply Tory party members. Yes. Everybody wants to pay less tax. Everybody wants to not be lectured about their food. Everybody wants to actually feel the PM is on their side, not on their back all the time. And I do think that's the danger for Labour, is they look at Liz Truss, they think that she's trying to pretend to be Margaret Thatcher, and they forget that Margaret Thatcher won 3 elections in a row and changed our country. That's the danger.
We've got this staggering figure out today. Obesity rates are rising twice as fast in most deprived parts of England. And on the same day that we're hearing that, we're talking about, stopping the junk food tax. And it just worries me. Yes, she's anti the nanny state, but is this responsible?
But at a time of cost of living crisis, why would you ban supermarkets offering buy one, get one free? Because that halves the cost of certain goods. The issue is always about how can people get access to fresh foods and make them for themselves? So it comes back to culture as much as cost. But when the pressure's on cost, you have to help people with the cost first.
OK. What about these Whitehall issues? I was reading, and obviously The Guardian picked up on it. I actually was reading about it, I think, in The Telegraph this morning, and suggestions they're going to cut the number of diversity candidates within Whitehall. It's something like 360 candidates have to be from an ethnic background. That's now going to be reduced. I mean, is this the sort of stuff that the Tory party membership really love?
I think what we're seeing, and consistently behind what Liz Truss is suggesting, is that you can drive down the costs of government. That's her balancing item to having tax cuts. Her balancing item to giving money back to the pockets of people is there should be cuts. I don't believe the cuts will be delivered, and quite often you see ministers and cabinet ministers and prime ministers promising tax cuts with balancing savings. The cuts come, but the savings don't. But I think there is a danger for the Tory party, which is if this is seen as being anti-equalities, if it's seen as being anti-black and Asian candidates, the Tory party have come a long way in making the country feel they're not racist in certain areas. They get a big Indian vote now, big Hindu vote. They shouldn't risk that vote by attacking diversity and thinking that people to go, that's irrelevant. If it's attacking racism and it's attacking equality, attacking equal rights for women, then, at a time when the lionesses are being celebrated, don't attack equal rights.
But I would say cutting diversity and inclusion officers is not akin to, necessarily being seen to promote racism or inequality. I think most people in this country think that particular industry has grown out of all proportion. They don't produce anything. They don't add anything to the economy, diversity and inclusion officers. They're just, a self-serving industry.
And doesn't seem to have affected the recording industry, because you picked up in the Times an issue talking about equality with disabled charities who've really gone for Beyoncé over a track on a new album. I mean, we won't actually share with listeners and viewers what she said.
I had to look this up yesterday.
Just extraordinary.
The coverage of this story has been fascinating because obviously no one wants to repeat the word.
Yeah.
And I was absolutely at a loss as to what it could be. And I was, it wasn't printed anywhere. I had to.
But it's written in the Times today.
Is it not blotted out?
No, it's written in the Times.
Let's actually cut to the chase. It's relating to spasticity, which a lot of people with cerebral palsy get. About 80% of people with cerebral palsy get it through no fault of their own, and it's a very debilitating condition. And it appears in the lyrics of this song, it has been dealt with as if it's just some kind of urban rap.
I mean, to be honest, it's a very crude lyric anyway. She says this word on that ass, she's saying with the offending lyric. So it's a bit of a
let me just
lyric anyway. So I find that slightly
This
offensive.
is the thing that I can't get my head round. This is what the spokesperson for Beyoncé says. The word was not used intentionally in a harmful way. Whether it was intentional or not, of course it's
like
going
a Boris Johnson defence.
Boris Johnson.
Just by actually using the word.
To be fair to Beyoncé, apparently,
because she is Queen Bee.
Obviously, this word is, as the Times says, regarded as wholly unacceptable in this country. However, apparently, it's taken on a separate meaning in African-American communities, which she was obviously she's obviously from herself, and so I think we're a little bit.
What's
precious.
the meaning in African American context, if I may ask,
It's
from my
just
ignorance?
dancing, I think.
It's a type of dance
in a kind
move.
of energetic way.
A colloquial description of losing control, I think, is the way the spokesperson described it. But I mean, but if the album's out there, what on earth do they do? Do they actually go to the record shops? And I know digitally you can obviously.
No one buys records anymore, Mark.
Exactly, no.
Beyonce record.
LP sales.
Excuse me.
Vinyl is back.
If anyone has ever bought a Beyonce
Vinyl
record,
is back. Yeah, tell us when have you bought a record recently?
Days. Yeah, but not a Beyonce record.
No, all right, okay.
Anyway, the Times
The
gives us
78's having to be repressed.
this is interesting. The Times gives us a list of all artists, stars who realised they got it wrong after they produced as Black Eyed Peas. Of course, their original lyrics were not "Let's get it started." They were "Let's get," and then a word that we don't use anymore.
Let's put a long-playing record on the gramophone.
All it does is pique my interest. I'm like, what is the word that we don't use anymore, Emily? Please,
Well,
we'll have to wait.
it's really not worth giving you the publicity on that.
No, but I do want to know now, so I'll have to look that up. Anyway, Emily and John, thank you very much for now. We'll see you again in the 7 o'clock.
Another big day for British athletes with the Commonwealth Games continuing in Birmingham. Today there are a whopping 37 medals up for grabs.
Well, our Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, joins us from the arena at Birmingham now to tell us all about it. I have to say, I switched on at the perfect moment yesterday to see the gymnasts absolutely cleaning up. What a glorious day for British sport yesterday.
Yeah, of course. These medals really are racking up. We're still very, very slightly behind the Australians in terms of medal count. They're first, we're second, so we are ahead of the Kiwis as well. So that's a big consolation, at least, in terms of these Commonwealth Games and those big countries that always perform really well. Exactly as you said there, Isabel. Lots and lots of medals, lots of golds, lots of silvers and lots of bronze. One thing that really stood out to me, though, was Laura Kenny, who got the gold in the scratch, something she didn't really expect to do. The day before, she didn't really perform as she might have expected to, but she took a little bit of an advantage in a crash after somebody fell over, and she sailed right through. In an interview, she said that she actually felt that she was going to be the winner. She was going to get that gold even before she crossed that finish line. And the really special thing about that was she got a gold in the exact same place where 10 years ago she got a gold in the London Olympics. So that's quite a nice way to wrap up her Commonwealth Games story. As we look ahead to today, 37 gold medals up for grabs, so times that by 3 for the amount of medals that are available here today for across silver and bronze as well. Gymnastics, of course, a few different names for you to look out for. You've got from England, Gianni Regina Moran in the men's vault, as well as English compatriots Alice Kinsella for the beam and Joe Fraser for the parallel bars. Just a little bit north of England's border for Scotland, coming out of retirement after a wee while for his third Commonwealth Games, Frank Baines. So lots of really interesting things to look out for in the gymnastics. The name that doesn't seem to go away from the headlines, though, is of course Adam Peaty from Uttoxeter, about an hour away from where we are. He didn't perform the way that we expected to yesterday, 2 days ago in the 100-metre breaststroke, where he was expected to clean up as he always did. Came fourth, so didn't even get a medal, but he's back in the pool again for the 50-metre breaststroke, and that's one where he said he feels like he's been backed into the corner like a lion, and that's when lions can be the most dangerous. This is, of course, day 5. We're only halfway through it. It feels like it's been going on for a very long time, but times it by 2. There's still lots more to come from. And despite it being a little bit more overcast, maybe it's going to be a little bit more rainy today, it doesn't seem that even at this point anybody's spirits can be dampened, despite it being 6 o'clock in the morning.
Will, just seeing that it's obviously encouraging people. Just seen a couple of runners whiz past you there alongside the water. I mean, it's obviously, encouraged people to think about sport once more.
Yeah, very much so. There's lots of people in Birmingham that seem to have taken advantage of the streets and the different routes that have been set up just to get around quite easily, whether it's on foot or on cycle. So you've seen people that are clearly just using that opportunity. But actually where we are today, we saw a couple of people in England tracksuits, as well as a couple of African nation tracksuits. And it looked like those people that just went past us were probably some sort of athletes that are warming up, whether it's just because it's part of their routine or they're competing. They whizzed past so quickly that I couldn't tell you who they were.
Well, the city's absolutely packed with athletes at the moment. That's the magic of all of this. Will Hollis, looks fabulous where you are. Lovely to see you. Thanks for that. Right, after the break, we're going to have more on that breaking news overnight.
Yeah. Yes, more on the killing of the leader of Al-Qaeda, CIA drone, it appears. First of all, let's get the weather details.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Eamonn McGivern from the Met Office. It's a gloomy and in places damp start to the day. A breezy day to come as well, but that breeze coming from the southwest will make it feel humid, and in fact it's going to be a hot day in the southeast. Now, weather fronts have been moving in across northern and central parts of the country overnight, and they'll continue to progress eastwards. They contain a lot of cloud and some heavy rain at first, especially for northern England into North Wales, that continuing through the morning before eventually easing away to the east. Nevertheless, it stays cloudy, it stays breezy, it stays damp in places, particularly northern and western England as well as Wales. Brighter skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a few showers in the far northwest where it will be fairly windy here, but towards the southeast, well, avoiding the rain once again and hot and humid with temperatures reaching the high 20s, even 30 Celsius. Low to mid 20s widely across the rest of the UK. And into Tuesday evening, we keep the cloud, we keep the breeze, and as a result, temperatures aren't going to fall very far on Tuesday night. So a warm, uncomfortable night for sleeping for many. And it will stay damp across northwest Scotland into northern and western England as well as parts of Wales. So we start off Wednesday with temperatures of 18 or 19 Celsius, a lot of cloud cover, again a breezy start, risk of gales for exposed parts of northern Scotland first thing. Through the day, an area of, well, showery rain will push across southwest England, South Wales as well, before moving into the Midlands as well as southern counties of England. Not a great deal of rainfall associated with this, and to the far southeast it stays very warm, 28 Celsius. Cooler for Scotland and Northern Ireland, temperatures back towards 18 to 21 Celsius. And Thursday and Friday we'll see that cooler air spread to all parts, but it also turns drier and brighter with just some scattered showers, mainly in the north.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
The US kills the leader of Al-Qaeda.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock. It's Tuesday, the 2nd of August. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel Webster and Mark Longhurst. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
The leader of al-Qaeda, Eamonn al-Zawahiri, has been killed in a drone strike in Afghanistan. US President Joe Biden has confirmed it. The successor to Osama bin Laden, one of the key plotters of the September 11th attacks in New York.
Former leadership rival Penny Mordaunt has backed Liz Truss for PM. The announcement came ahead of a hustings last night in which Truss and her rival Rishi Sunak faced questions over policing, tax and migration.
The Court of Appeal has refused to postpone the ending of life support for Archie Battersby beyond midday today. The 12-year-old's mother has said that she will fight to the end, vowing to take the case now to the UK's highest court, the Supreme Court.
And you can join in any of our discussions. Email us gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can send us a tweet at gbnews.
And so to our top story. The leader of al-Qaeda, Eamonn al-Zawahiri, has been killed in a US drone strike, the US government has now confirmed.
Speaking in Washington, President Joe Biden had this to say.
On Saturday, at my direction, the United States successfully concluded an airstrike in Kabul, Afghanistan, that killed the emir of al-Qaeda, Eamonn al-Zawahiri. Now, justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more.
Well, earlier we spoke to Jamil Jaffer, a defence and intelligence advisor who actually served under President George W. Bush.
Obviously, Eamonn al-Zawahiri felt comfortable enough that he could return to Kabul, Afghanistan, bring his wife, bring his children. Luckily enough, the U.S. Were able to follow his children and his wife to his hideout, his safe house, determine a pattern of life. They've been watching him since about April, determined that he would be out on his balcony every so often, and ultimately take a shot with 2 Hellfire missiles and take him out. Long before Osama bin Laden, he had founded the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, was involved in the plot to assassinate an Egyptian president, and ultimately in 1996 joined hands with Osama bin Laden in their worldwide declaration of jihad against crusaders and infidels, the ultimate creation of al-Qaeda that led to the terrorist attacks of 9/11 that he and bin Laden plotted together. After bin Laden was killed in 2011 by a U.S. counterterrorism attack in Pakistan, Eamonn al-Zawahiri became the #1 leader of al-Qaeda, which a position he's held for the last decade. And now, at long last, after we've taken out a number of the #3s and #2s in al-Qaeda, we've now taken out the leader. To be sure, al-Qaeda will try to regroup and will appoint a new leader, probably Sirajuddin Haqqani, a member of the Afghan government and the former head of the Haqqani network. But al-Qaeda, for now at least, is been worn down. They will come back, though, and the key is to keep the pressure on them, both in the United States to prevent attacks in the United States, but also against our allies in the UK and Europe.
Surprised that he was found in Kabul. We were always told that al-Qaeda and the Taliban were the worst of enemies.
Well, you know, they are enemies in the sense that al-Qaeda and the Taliban have fought at times. That being said, it's worth remembering that the Taliban did host Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda on the 9/11 attacks and refused to hand him over and ultimately succumbed to the conflict with the United States. They've returned to power. It's no surprise with the Haqqani back in the government that al-Qaeda is back in the game and back in Kabul. This was an expected thing. The president did say that we would continue to conduct counterterrorism operations. He deserves credit for that. That being said, this is not an example of the over-the-horizon counterterrorism strategy succeeding. That still remains to be seen, whether we can effectively carry that out over the long run without boots on the ground and without intelligence forces and the like present in Kabul and the rest of Afghanistan.
Amazing feat of technology that a drone strike was able to do this. A huge bounty on his head, $25 million US. But I wonder, do you think this morning, is the world a safer place? I mean, as you described, there have been tensions between al-Qaeda and, of course, the Taliban in Afghanistan. Will they now be upset about US involvement in Afghanistan again in some way? Also, will we see some sort of proliferation now of al-Qaeda now that their figurehead has gone?
Well, the Taliban government has argued that this is a breach of the agreement the U.S. had with the Taliban by taking a strike inside of Afghanistan. Of course, we've said that they're in violation of the agreement by allowing al-Qaeda to be operating out of Kabul. And so there's a dispute about what the agreement means. That being said, at least in the short run, al-Qaeda is likely to go down and regroup. That being said, they may try to provoke inspired attacks by Westerners, folks in Europe, folks in Great Britain, folks in the United States who wanted to conduct attacks and maybe doing them inspired by al-Qaeda. So we may see an uptick in the short run in response to this attack. And in the long run, there's no doubt that al-Qaeda will continue to try to operate through its affiliates, through its franchisees, and to continue to try and conduct large-scale attacks against the West, against Americans, against all of Europeans and the rest of the West across the globe. And so we need to get the pressure on al-Qaeda. We need to also understand that ISIS itself is also another threat, separate and apart from al-Qaeda. We need to continue to combat both of them aggressively.
And Jamil, another thought, just to switch back to domestic politics. How important now is this for President Joe Biden? Of course, he's really been tanking in the various polls, and questions about his own position with another bout of COVID, of course. This will boost his standing, we assume.
Well, there's no doubt that any time the United States has a major military victory or a major counterterrorism success, the president's going to get a benefit from that, and he should. That being said, inflation remains a major challenge. COVID continues to be a challenge around the globe as well as in the United States. And at the end of the day, economics are a huge issue. And then, of course, we have the upcoming visit of Speaker Nancy Pelosi to China.
Yeah.
The Biden administration has indicated they don't really want her to go. At the same time, they're going to have to respond to whatever the Chinese do. That may cause additional challenges. And so President Biden is in for a tough run as it comes. And with the upcoming elections, both the by-elections here in 2022, but also presidential elections in 2024, it's probably an uphill battle for the Democrats and for President Biden.
Jamil Jan Jaffer, a former intelligence advisor to the White House, speaking to us from the States a little earlier.
To domestic matters now, and the former leadership candidate Penny Mordaunt has come out and endorsed Liz Truss for leader in the latest blow to Rishi Sunak's campaign.
Well, she remains front-runner to win the leadership race after last night's hustings at Exeter in Devon, in which rival Rishi Sunak were all questioned on issues of immigration, policing and the unions.
Well, let's get some analysis on how it's all going with our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Very good morning to you, Tom. Look, really interesting to talk about polls, and a few new polls emerging this week. And I know you were lamenting yesterday the lack of any substantial polling of membership in the last week. Tell us a bit more about what we're hearing today.
Well, you wait for days and days for any polls at all, and then two come along at once. We've got two different polls out yesterday, one with published tables in a more normal way. Redfield and Wilton Strategies have shown what the two candidates, how they would fare in a head-to-head against Sir Keir Starmer. Interestingly, Liz Truss has closed the gap, just inching ahead of Sir Keir Starmer for the first time on this tracker by just 1 point. Rishi Sunak a little bit behind. But the other interesting poll is one by an Italian firm. The Times are reporting it on their front page, that puts Liz Truss's lead down from 24 points, as YouGov found over a week ago, to just 5 points as a lead, as this Italian firm has found now.
Amongst the membership specifically.
Amongst the membership specifically, although I've been speaking to some people in the British polling community about this poll who are a little bit confused about how this firm has defined members and where they've found the members, given they haven't polled Conservative members before.
Right.
And it's a big undertaking to
But
find
they just had Sunak 5 points
groups.
behind, which is a significant change, as you say, and 9% undecided. And according to the Sunak camp, they're saying this is what they've been finding on the ground, that there's been a lot
Support
of people...
is soft.
Yeah, decisions haven't been
the,
made.
the line from the Sunak campaign is that they have been focusing on the ground war compared to the air war, going association to association, really putting in the hard graft in those constituencies and talking to members and persuading them almost one by one. So yes, they're sort of using this poll as showing, look, the race isn't over yet. Although, interestingly, the poll did seem to be done for the Truss campaign. Now, I wonder how many more polls they would have done and which ones we can see and which ones we can't see, which ones are being made public, and what all the psychology is.
Yeah, is it a double bluff, maybe?
Is this trying to make sure that Truss supporters don't get complacent, that there is still a fight to go, or is this just more for the media to talk about as this race goes on for another month?
We're grateful for it, if nothing else. Exactly, there's a lot longer to go in this contest. Let's talk about some of the red meat, then, that's being thrashed about. We've been talking about cuts to the civil service today, haven't we? Been talking about diversity, we've been talking about policing, thought police as well. What else is up for grabs in the policy arena?
Yes, it seems we're getting... the policy barrage has not relented. Liz Truss, specifically the most headline-grabbing policy is with regard to saving billions of pounds in terms of how the civil service is run, getting rid of these jobs of diversity managers, often very high-paid jobs that we see advertised, but also this idea of regional pay boards, that there shouldn't be national pay bargaining when it comes to the civil service, that the cost of living is very different in the northeast as it is in the southwest or the southeast or other parts of the country, and that pay should reflect that. That could be a big saving for the civil service. Of course, the big opposition to that we saw on the front page of The Independent today is that that doesn't look like it's a very levelling up promise. Right. Angela Rayner, the deputy leader of the Labour Party, has been attacking it this morning, saying that this looks like something that people in richer areas might get more, people in poorer areas might get less. That doesn't seem particularly equitable.
Now, one might reflect that some of the audience members in Exeter last night looked a little nonplussed when Penny Mordaunt strode up to the dais and then declared herself in support of Liz Truss, when we understood that this was a so-called blue-on-blue war going on, and actually that the Mordaunt camp had accused them of dirty tricks. Suddenly they're best of friends. I mean, what's been going on behind the scenes?
Yes, it's a really interesting endorsement there. It does just show that sort of big momentum is still really behind Liz Truss when it comes to those big endorsements. We've seen now multiple leadership rivals endorse her. Tom Tugendhat's another one who might have been a bit of a surprise in some minds, and indeed Nadhim Zawahi as well. But the interesting thing about how these hustings were presented, they didn't announce who Penny Mordaunt was backing. They just invited Penny Mordaunt up onto the stage, and she gave a bit of a cryptic speech. It started off saying who she was going, and then ended up saying Liz Truss. And that was a pretty big moment there. Of course, it makes the front page of the Telegraph, alongside a positive write-up of these two people putting aside their differences and talking about building a Conservative team to move forward. Of course, we also see today the Telegraph has endorsed formally Liz Truss as their choice for the next Prime Minister.
Has the Mail come out yet?
The Mail has come out.
They did early on,
well.
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's just the Times for Rishi at the moment.
Although the Times editorial, interestingly, hasn't been as clear for Rishi as it was perhaps a week or so ago. There seems to be some slightly more positive write-up in the Times. I don't think the Times is 100% still on that Rishi.
What was it you were quoting yesterday, when the herd moves?
The herd moves, so Boris Johnson. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
OK, Tom, always good to talk to you. See you again later on in the programme. Thank you very much.
The parents of Archie Battersby will today appeal to the Supreme Court over the decision not to delay the withdrawal of life-preserving treatment for their brain-damaged child.
Well, as you'll remember yesterday, the Court of Appeal refused to postpone the ending of life support for the 12-year-old beyond midday today, despite an urgent request from the United Nations. Our London reporter is outside the Supreme Court today. Alice, this is all incredibly tense, of course, for the family. The Supreme Court previously saying this is nothing to do with them, this isn't in their remit. What do you think they're likely to say today?
Yes, absolutely. The Supreme Court refused to intervene last week when the parents of Archie Battersby had asked for this extension in order for them to speak to the United Nations, which is what they did. However, the Supreme Court chose not to intervene. The question is, will they intervene now, given what has transpired with the United Nations in their intervention? It was their Committee for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. They said that they requested the UK government to postpone withdrawing treatment until the committee had looked at the case. Now, crucially, the UK does share treaties and conventions with the United Nations when it comes to persons with the rights of disabilities. But as Sir Andrew McFarlane said yesterday, who's the most senior family court judge in England and Wales, he was the judge presiding over this at the Court of Appeal yesterday, he said international unincorporated treaties are not UK law. We are not bound by what the United Nations sort of say on this. However, the family are going to try and argue that because of this sort of intervention from the United Nations, which led to the government referring this case to the Court of Appeal yesterday, that changes, I suppose, the kind of parameters of this case, and they're going to attempt to put forward an appeal to the Supreme Court, the highest court in the UK, to postpone the withdrawing of treatment, which was meant to take place at midday today. But judges in the Court of Appeal yesterday, they didn't give permission, but as I understand, both parents will be submitting an application for an appeal to the decision which was made yesterday.
And Alice, just remind us of the medical position, because as you say, 12 noon today was when doctors said they were going to start withdrawing the treatment. Now, Holly's mum, of course, incredibly difficult position. She had this letter on Saturday pointing out the steps that would be taken. She referred to it as an orchestrated execution.
Yeah, I've read the letter myself, and I have to say it is a difficult read, I think, on both sides. I mean, on the one hand, it's very much itemises exactly what will happen when treatment is withdrawn, how medication will be stopped, how the ventilator will be sort of disconnected from Archie. But the hospital also makes a number of points in which, you know, the support that will be in place. And their perspective is that they have wanted to manage Archie's death, and that is really kind of the second time it was in the High Court. That's kind of really what the discussion was about. That unfortunately at some point Archie's going to die. How is he going to die? Is he going to die in a way that the hospital argued was they didn't want it to be chaotic, because as we were hearing from the judge yesterday, he could die of organ failure at any minute. It could happen in the dead of the night. One of his parents might not be there. So the hospital have always wanted to say that they want this to be managed in a way that it is not chaotic. And crucially, the courts have so far ruled that it is in Archie's best interest for that treatment to be withdrawn. We had some quite graphic and quite detailed and very sad accounts from doctors really showing that Archie has become malnourished. His brain is completely unresponsive. He's had digestive problems, and managing his condition in that way is incredibly difficult for the hospital and for the staff. And as Isabella was saying in the last hour, that led to Mr. Justice Hayden saying the concern was that prolonging treatment in this way, you could in fact be protracting his death rather than prolonging his life. So that's very much the hospital's perspective, but the family really sort of refute this because they want him to die in a way that's, quote, natural, i.e. there's not a time given for all sort of medication to suddenly stop. They very much say, you know, if he falls into a cardiac arrest at 2 in the morning as a crash team, that's God's way, and that's something that they want to fight until the very end. And they have. This is a legal challenge that has gone, to the highest court in the land if it makes it to the Supreme Court today. So from their point of view, they're going to fight to the absolute bitter end to keep their son alive. But it's an incredibly difficult situation, which I'm sure any parent watching this would just say this is their absolute worst nightmare. But as of today, there should be some resolution to it, but we've thought this yesterday, so it's really hard, I think, with this case to know exactly how it's going to play out. The hospital have said they won't withdraw treatment until they've heard from the Supreme Court, but legally they are well within their rights to, at midday today, begin withdrawing treatment.
Les Porter, thank you very much for that.
You're watching GB News, and it is 7:18, and let's bring you up to date with the latest news headlines now.
Hundreds of thousands of people with type 1 diabetes in England will soon have access to a life-changing gadget. There'll be no need for a scan or finger prick test to track their blood sugar levels. NHS England says a new arm tech will send that information to a mobile app at all times.
Tory leader candidate Liz Truss has promised a war on Whitehall waste if she becomes Prime Minister. The Foreign Secretary also pledging a leaner, more efficient civil service. The other candidate, Rishi Sunak, said his economic plan was one of the most far-reaching initiatives to cut income tax that people have seen.
British Airways has reportedly suspended selling short-haul flights from Heathrow for at least a week. According to The Times, the airline suspended ticket sales for domestic and European services until and including Monday to comply with their cap on passenger numbers. So a little bit later in the programme, about 9:15, we'll be talking to a reality star. His name's Charlie King, and he's been talking about the pressure to be perfect and social media and how that's affected
Love Island on
his
at the
mental
moment,
health,
yeah.
of course, yes. And it's been a big issue. There's been a big talk about how this epidemic of mental health issues is really being promoted by social media.
Body dysmorphia, they call it.
It's
Something
a huge issue. So we're asking you this morning to get in touch on your views on all of this. Dawn French has been doing a podcast, which the Daily Mail have picked up on. Really interesting comments, I thought, from her, because obviously she's famously struggled with her weight throughout the years and is a mum of girls, as are we, Mark.
Yes.
What's she been saying?
Well, you may remember the film Who Framed Roger Rabbit, although it was way back in 1988. Cartoon character there. And she has likened Jessica Rabbit, as she was, to Kim Kardashian. and the various shapes one can see. I don't need to sort of tell you what shapes. But basically, she says, I cannot entirely love perfect people. I cannot understand why people only want to show us how perfect they are.
Yeah, well, it's interesting when she says, women came close to equality, and then along came Jessica Rabbit. She said, the idea that women have got to be orange and have lashes on all the time, they've got to have Kardashian shapes, it's impossible stuff, whereas their flawed, real beauty is just heavenly. I really do agree with that. I really do believe with embracing imperfections and finding the beauty in differences.
Is this the price we pay for social media? And we get all the so-called celebs in Daily Mail online, for instance, and you see them with these pouty mouths and these sort of... They've had
everyone looking the same and trying to conform, and just
looking
this
bizarre.
Yeah,
as a
looking
result
very
of
strange.
it.
Well, I think of Katie Price when I think of the kind of antithesis of all of the what's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah,
perfect
because
example
I think
of it all.
I've lost count of the number of procedures she's had.
Yeah,
when
but that's a
clearly she
symptom,
was a
isn't
very
it?
striking-looking woman before. Why do you have the need to do that? I mean, obviously, there's a mental health issue as well as a physical.
But also, how
aspect
do
of it.
you protect young women from feeling that pressure? And I don't think it is, as Charlie King, he is a chap, he'll be talking about how men feel this pressure as well. How do you protect people from that and encourage them to focus on other things? I always think of my mum saying, if you focused as much on what's inside your head as what's going on the outside, and that always played on my mind whenever I was feeling sorry for myself. I'd go and read a book or something, make myself feel better. But there's got to be some way of tackling it all.
Just keep your shirt on. After the break, Aidan is with us to go through all the big sports stories, including the latest medal haul in Birmingham for the England team. First, though, let's get the weather details.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a gloomy and in places damp start to the day. A breezy day to come as well, but that breeze coming from the southwest will make it feel humid, and in fact it's going to be a hot day in the southeast. Now, weather fronts have been moving in across northern and central parts of the country overnight, and they'll continue to progress eastwards. They contain a lot of cloud and some heavy rain at first, especially for northern England into North Wales, that continuing through the morning before eventually easing away to the east. Nevertheless, it stays cloudy, it stays breezy, it stays damp in places, particularly northern and western England as well as Wales. Brighter skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a few showers in the far northwest, where it will be fairly windy here. But towards the southeast, well, avoiding the rain once again, and hot and humid with temperatures reaching the high 20s, even 30 Celsius. Low to mid-20s widely across the rest of the UK. And into Tuesday evening, we keep the cloud, we keep the breeze, and as a result, temperatures aren't going to fall very far on Tuesday night. So a warm, uncomfortable night for sleeping for many. And it will stay damp across northwest Scotland into northern and western England as well as parts of Wales. So we start off Wednesday with temperatures of 18 or 19 Celsius, a lot of cloud cover. Again, a breezy start, risk of gales for exposed parts of northern Scotland first thing. Through the day, an area of, well, showery rain will push across southwest England, South Wales as well, before moving into the Midlands as well as southern counties of England. Not a great deal of rainfall associated with this, and to the far southeast it stays very warm, 28 Celsius. Cooler for Scotland and Northern Ireland, temperatures back towards 18 to 21 Celsius. And Thursday and Friday we'll see that cooler air spread to all parts, but it also turns drier and brighter with just some scattered showers, mainly in the north.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. It's fast approaching 7:30. Still to come on our programme this morning.
At 7:45, Beyoncé agreeing to change the lyrics of one of her songs over the use of a slur. But is that the right decision? We'll be speaking to a disability charity. Plenty of your views coming in on that as well.
And at 8:45, we'll be speaking to Jacob Rees-Mogg this morning. He is, of course, backing Liz Truss. He has been from right at the very beginning. He is vowing, along with Liz Truss, to cut down on Whitehall waste if she becomes Prime Minister.
And you can join in any of our discussions, of course, by emailing us gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
So time to turn to sport now. Aidan McGee joins us in the studio to discuss all of the big stories. What should we talk about first, Aidan? At the Euro 2022 final, we've changed the game, says Leah Williamson.
Well, we won't know for a few years yet. I mean, you know, the legacy will be judged over a 10-year period, period of time. We don't want to make the same mistakes as we made in London 2012. We were told that everyone would be rushing to various aquatic centres and everywhere else to take up swimming.
Velodromes and the rest of it.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, the legacy after 2012 was done quite well in terms of facilities. They're all used, and that's not the same as all. No, it can't be said around the world. But in terms of participation, it didn't happen that way. There was a precedent as well in cricket in 2019 when England won the World Cup. We were told that everyone would flock back to the county game, but still, it's a man, woman, and a dog going there. So we won't know for a number of years. But having said that, that was a huge shot in the arm in the last few days. There is precedent as well in terms of women's football. Japan secured a magnificent victory back in 2011 when they beat USA in the final. We were told that in the league season we'd see a bump in attendances. It didn't happen. It went back to what it was previously. Now, the litmus test will be the WSL when we go back in September.
Women's Super League.
Women's Super League, yeah. It's been going for 2 years. It's all the key protagonists in the Premier League are there: Man United, Chelsea, Tottenham, Liverpool.
But will the litmus test also be the World Cup, which is just a year away? I mean, we've got a couple of qualifying games at Austria.
Yeah.
I mean, we struggled a bit against Austria, didn't we?
Yeah, but then they're 21st in the world. For context, I mean, the depth isn't there, really, to be honest with you. It tends to be the same 5 or 6 teams that get to the latter stage of the tournament. For comparison, Norway are 10 places ahead of them in the world rankings. Norway lost 8-0 to England in the tournament just gone. They lost 7-0 to Holland as well. So I don't expect Austria to be a problem. Next year, though, the USA will be... They're still the ones to beat. I mean, they've won 4 World Cups. Germany have won 2. They've won the last 2 World Cups as well. They won it in 91 and 99. So they've got the pedigree both historically and recently. One thing I'd say, though, is that Alex Morgan and Megan Rapinoe was the lady with the purple hair who performed so well in the last tournament. They're going to be 33 and 37 respectively. Well, no, they're not going to be older than that. They're going to be 34 and 38. In football terms, that's knocking on a little bit. So I think it's England's to lose. I've not seen a team produce that level of form.
Because we've got a young team, relatively.
I mean, their average... Well, it's what do you expect a football team to be? Probably about between 24 and 27.
Yeah, mid-20s.
But having said that, I've not known a team have such a train of thought, a train of form. I mean, you look at it, 105 goals now in 19 games. Sorry, 106 goals in 19 games, just 5 conceded. So I think that It depends if they can hang on to the manager. That's probably the next question you're going to ask me.
That was what I was going to say. It talks about extending her contract beyond 2025, and
yes.
It's a good idea if we can.
Yeah, it would absolutely. I mean, look, that's back-to-back tournaments now she's won with, and it's always key. It's one thing doing it with the same team. She's done it with different teams now. She's done it with her home nation, Netherlands, and obviously coming over to England. And England was a big one because they've never done it before, and there would be pressure on her back as well. Having said that, you never know what's loaded. It sounds like a long contract, doesn't it, 2025, but you never know what's in these contracts. You never know what the clauses are. It's the same in any other walk of life.
Performance-related.
Yeah, it could be.
To the World Cup extended.
Or it could be, look, USA is still the big job in world football. She might have a clause in her contract that says if the USA come knocking, well, you've got to let me go. You know, there are clauses in terms of, you know, in football contracts as well, in men's football, if clubs offer over a certain amount of money, then you go. So you never know what the clauses are in there, but I think it makes sense when you're trying to build something. And the FA already said yesterday, Mark Bullingdon said that they've probably won this tournament earlier than they expected. So let's try and build a legacy. They've had success earlier than they anticipated. Let's try and build a legacy that can take us maybe 10 years down the line. And yeah, of course, why not the World Cup? It's a year from now. It's in Australia and New Zealand, so that will be difficult because it's not as temperate as the players would be used to. It probably plays into the hands of the USA. However, it's all up to grabs now. And don't forget, the teams between 6 and 12 will also do better as well, and Germany will be strong.
Yeah, they'll obviously want to come back and avenge the result. Commonwealth Games, big medal haul, more up for grabs today. And Laura Kenny, obviously not in Birmingham, down at Lee Valley, talking of velodromes, but probably her last big hurrah.
Yeah, I thought this was extraordinary, actually. I mean, she was telling her husband, Jason, also a very celebrated athlete, she was saying, I don't fancy this, I'm not up for this, I don't feel right. The training doesn't, I can't get up for this. She was saying, I've had enough. I can't get motivated for training. I mean, she said the interview was extraordinary yesterday. She was there with a gold medal around her neck. And she's saying, I just didn't feel like this. And then she said because she hadn't qualified very impressively, she was right at the back of the order as well. And so I think it was a security guard who said to her, he said, you've got this. And that was the only encouragement she'd had in herself, the only belief she had.
And then it sort of clicked.
Just clicked, yeah. I mean, listen, it's a fast race, and I guess you get some momentum very quickly over a short period of time, you can go and win it. But you wouldn't think that, having seen the race. I mean, she powered through, and the timing was perfect as well. And so it was an extraordinary... I mean, I think that's probably the last we'll see of her in competition. But so what? She's won so much, and she's been a proud ambassador for this country. But that's elite sport for you. That's kind of... Yes, OK, you can have days where you're not feeling good. Sometimes those days might be in a key final. And then you just have to produce it on when it really matters. So all credit to her.
I switched on yesterday just as Courtney Tulloch was winning his gold yesterday, and talk about producing endless success for the British gymnast. And there he was on his, what do you call them, the rings?
I don't know. What do you call
I don't know the technical term, but it was a joy to watch. And Georgia May Fenton also winning a gold. And I've always loved the gymnastics, whether it's the Olympics, whether it's the Commonwealth, and great to see them reigning success there.
Don't forget Duncan Scott as well. That's 2 bronze medals for him in the swimming. So really good, really impressive.
And Petey going again.
Yes, that's right. I mean, look, he's
50 metres this time.
Yes, that's right. I mean, very disappointing result for him. But he's had a foot injury.
Yeah, broke his foot only 10 weeks ago.
And I just kind of feel sorry for James Wilby, who pipped him the day before. Because everyone's talking about Adam Peaty's injury because he's been so imperious. He hasn't lost a race since 2014.
Yeah, I know.
And so
it has to happen at some point. After an injury, it's quite a good way to do it.
But he's 27. but he's 27, and he'll come back. No question about it.
All right,
lovely. Thank you for that.
Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Stay with us. We're going to take a quick break. After that, John McTernan and Emily Carr will be back with us going through the papers.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Computer says no. My battery's gone.
Oh dear, never mind. We don't need it, we've
Anyway.
got the papers. That'll take us through.
Yes, joining us, Conservative Home columnist Emily Carver and political strategist for BCW Global and former advisor, no less, to Tony Blair, John McTurnan. Your battery's all right?
My battery's
You're OK?
fine.
Yeah, all right. All right for some.
Emily, should we start with the Daily Mail front page? They are, of course, supporting Liz Truss. They're talking about her tax cuts and specifically to halt junk food tax.
Yes, this is Liz Truss's pledge against the nanny state, I guess. As we've seen in recent years, there's been many taxes put on junk food, which is sugar high in salt, fat and salt. And a lot of Conservatives, a lot of freedom-minded Conservatives are sick of this kind of thing. They think people should be able to choose what they eat and drink. Apparently, so does Liz Truss.
And yet we've got all these dietitians and doctors saying that all this processed food and the buy one, get one free, all the deals at the supermarket, that's encouraging obesity. And we really need to do something about it on a national scale.
But they were also the same people who thought that locking down the nation wouldn't have an impact on our waistline, and it did.
Not the nutrition.
Well, the lockdown lump, as it
public
became
health
known as, I think.
But no, there's also a study out today, which I don't know if you may have seen, that says that the TfL on Transport for London advertising ban on junk food led to 100,000 fewer obesity cases, but it's totally based on
But it makes
junk
sense,
science. Because
doesn't it?
actually, children have got fatter in London in the previous 2 years since it was implemented. So I do think that there's a cultural problem, isn't there, among children? They're not moving enough. They're sitting in front of the TV or their phones for too long every day. They're not going out and exercising, and they're eating too much junk food. But I do worry that, taxing things more is not the answer. They've got a levy on...
The same on sugary drinks as well?
Yeah, they've got a levy on sugary drinks. OK, so you pay, 5p more for a Coke than a Diet Coke. I'm not really sure what change that really makes, apart from a few more pounds to the Treasury. But anyway, she's cutting back on this nanny state stuff. Lots of people will be happy with that. Buy one, get one free offers won't be axed, that sort of thing.
Well, it will probably play well to the choir. John, should we talk about the Telegraph, page 6, talking about frontbenchers defying, again, Starmer's strike diktat. What do you think about his position in all of this? Is he messing this up?
The behaviour of frontbenchers going to picket lines is just infantile. The Labour Party is either a party of protest or it's a party of power. People who want to go along and support a strike should be in a far-left party, a groupuscle, a Trotskyist party. They shouldn't be in the Labour Party.
Lisa Nandy, the latest, she went to Communication Workers Union, saying to talk to them, actually not joining the picket line.
She was, unlike
defence.
Sam Tarry, she wasn't doing a media round.
Yeah.
She was actually in her own constituency and met some of her constituents. I think it's fair enough to meet your constituents. I think the Labour Party's problem is this long hangover from Corbyn. Corbyn's politics were from the far left. His politics were, are you on strike? I support you. I won't ask what your case is. I won't ask what the cause is.
Give me the placard.
I support you. Power to the people. And it's like, it is a childish form of politics. The Labour Party governs for business as well as for workers.
Is there another problem, though? And it indicates that Starmer hasn't got control of his party, that he hasn't got that sort of position where he can say, this is what we're doing, and you stick to it.
Well, the issue for Starmer is he's a weak leader because the Labour Party are weak. He's not a weak leader because he's personally weak. The Labour Party had their worst defeat since the 1930s. And he's had to try to do in 2 years what Neil Kinnock took 8 years to do, to bring Labour back to being competitive and electable. And they are. And it's just that I think in opposition it's really hard, and people just, in the end, guys, too hard to try to be disciplined.
But what about those Labour members that say that we've got to actually reflect the concern about the cost of living crisis, that, it's not just unions, it's individuals who want to complain about how much pay they're getting and protest is the way.
Labour should have policies on the cost of living crisis. That's why they had them with Rachel Reeves suggests the windfall tax, that more money should be going to the pockets of ordinary households. The problem is, most people are not in a union. Hardly anybody's ever been on strike. And I don't know anybody who's been on a picket line. So you're really making yourself marginal and attached to the past if you say a picket line is the way to deal with the cost of living. Actually, increasing universal credit would help with cost of living.
Should we turn our attention to the civil service? The quote, which I have to say, probably in poor taste, is that Liz Truss is going to be waging war on the civil service. Talk of trying to make £11 billion in cuts. What are the Times saying about all this? Is this all to do with weighting and pay based on regions and where people live?
Yeah, exactly. So her aim is to apparently reduce the wage bill, the whole of government's wage bill, by £8.8 billion a year. Now, that is obviously going to mean drastic cuts if we ever were to do this. Previous prime ministers, previous ministers have all promised to, cut back, roll back the scope of Whitehall, roll back all the bureaucracy, make it more streamlined and so on. And it's proven rather difficult to do because there are claims for the need for all of these jobs and so on. She said that, yes, pay should be decided more on a local basis. I think that's fair. I think the cost of living does vary.
Because the Treasury's got up to Darlington, isn't it?
Yes, does vary massively where you're living. So I think there should be weightings in that respect. I think the way that pay is decided, though, should be more performance-based. I don't like this sort of collective bargaining, the fact that, whichever job always gets the same amount of pay regardless of your abilities, perhaps. That would be a fairer way to do it.
How would you measure the performance of a civil servant, though?
Well, how do you measure the performance of any job?
Of a
it has
broadcaster.
to be, how your manager...
Yeah, when your battery goes.
Or does it often go to who you like the most and,
But then I guess that's in, any walk of life,
No,
really.
exactly, but it's open to
here,
abuse, I would
which presenter
suggest.
does the boss like the most?
Yeah.
It's all
well, there is that, yeah.
Although you have
Let's
ratings.
just tie it in, because Jacob Rees-Mogg had a real go at the civil service as well about working at home. Is there a bit of a sort of, attack on the civil... The blob, they were called at one point.
But offices...
Yes, but they've been in government for 12 years. They should have sorted out the blob.
Well, they massively increased the blob to deal with COVID, didn't they?
And Brexit.
There actually aren't enough desks in Whitehall for all civil servants to turn up. So when there was this diktat...
That's why they were working from home.
No, they were working from home because the idea was to reduce the cost of office space. So give people flexible working. There's a lot of contradiction going on, because obviously working from home is the best way to break the rail strike.
Yeah. Okay.
I think a lot of viewers will be happy that she's pledging to scrap just over 350 civil service diversity officers.
Has she said how many she's scrapping? Sorry?
350.
All of them? Because that is...
Is that all of them?
Well, I read in the Telegraph this morning there are 326 at the moment, but I wasn't clear how many there would be.
She's discovered 40 more in the cupboard.
Department? I'm sure there are more.
We need to find out how many there are, but that was the way it was covered.
International affairs, FT, John, the Taiwan trip. This is Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
And the difficulty is she's not obviously representing effectively the president or the White House, because she's from Congress.
Yeah.
So it's been a bit difficult for Joe Biden to rein her back in. But clearly the military saying this is not a good idea.
Well, the question is, what is our position in regard to China? Where we're really clear Russia should not have invaded Ukraine. We're united against Russia. We know that Xi and Putin are talking to each other, and that Xi is looking at Taiwan. Does he want to complete his leadership of China by invading Taiwan?
Because he's coming for re-election.
He's going to come through another Congress. He wants to extend it. He wants to be the most significant Chinese leader since Mao. The big issue is, do we defend Taiwan in the same terms as Ukraine? And Joe Biden wants to, and Nancy Pelosi is signalling that the legislative arm of the US government is in solidarity with Taiwan. And really, China can't veto countries that politicians go to. They can't say don't go there. And this is the thing about this is it's on the front page of only one paper, the Financial Times. Yeah. It's probably the most significant story of the moment that there could be conflict. I mean, there's talk in the paper about the Chinese Air Force
buzzing her plane,
which is an incredibly aggressive suggestion.
Also, what's very concerning is the way Russia seems to be actively aligning itself with China, particularly in terms of their resources. This gas pipe that's being produced, Europe doesn't want Russian gas anymore,
we'll sell it
so
to
it's
Chinese.
turning its, it's turning its direction towards China. So yes, I mean, people are saying, is this just the downfall of the West?
Yeah. Something fishy.
And not rishy.
Yes.
Oh.
There we go.
Boom.
Very good.
Yes, I've been doing lots of Truss news, so I need to do some Sunak news. But first, British adore fish, but we don't know a fin about them, is what the Mail says. I know. If you're one of the 87% of Britons who love consuming it, you may be surprised to learn that we don't know all that much about fish.
Test us.
OK, so, do you know what Pulpo gallicia is?
No.
Anyone?
That's squid.
Spanish of some kind?
It's squid.
Yeah, it's Spanish.
Squid.
From the far end.
Oh, almost.
Is it?
Almost.
Octopus?
Octopus.
Octopus.
Octopus, potatoes and paprika. Do you know
Calamaris, of course, is Spanish.
Do you know what sashimi is?
Yes, it's a type of sushi. Oh, gosh.
Yeah, it's just
salmon.
the raw fish.
Raw fish,
It's just the raw fish on its own without any of the seaweed or anything like that. And moule
raw fish
marinier.
with seaweed at 7:45 in the morning. Carry on, yeah.
Moule marinier.
Oh, yeah, that's mussels in white wine. Yes.
Yes, in white wine, yeah. And one more. I'll give one more.
One more.
Tempura prawns.
Oh, everyone knows. It's in a light
Deep fried
batter.
prawns, yeah.
Exactly, and that's the words they use, in a light batter. Fried prawns in a light batter. There we go.
All delicious.
Yeah.
We're very sophisticated on this panel, clearly.
Right,
We took a battering on that one.
Stop it. Right, Emily Carver, John McTan will be back with more from the papers for us at about 8:30. But for now, we're going to bring you up to date on all the latest headlines.
Well, BP's second quarter profits they've more than trebled, surprise, surprise, amid the soaring oil and gas prices. The oil giant reporting a profit of nearly £7 billion, the highest in 14 years. It compares with just £2.3 billion a year ago.
British Airways has suspended selling short-haul flights from Heathrow for at least a week. The Times reported the airline suspended ticket sales for domestic and European services until and including Monday to comply with the airport's cap on passenger numbers.
Parts of the UK set to see tropical temperatures once more, but some can expect heavy rain, possibly thunderstorms. The forecast is predicting hot, sunny and humid weather for the southeast in the coming days. Highs of 30 Celsius in the south, we're told, remaining in the high 20s, though, through to Thursday. So it will cool off as the week goes on.
Now, Beyoncé is set to edit one of the songs on her new album, Renaissance, after facing criticism from disability campaigners.
Yes, the song Heated contains a derogatory term that's often used to demean people with cerebral palsy.
Following a backlash, the pop star's publicist has confirmed that the word will now be replaced and says it was not used intentionally in a harmful way.
Well, for more on this, we're joined by our showbiz journalist Stephanie, as well as Warren Cohen, who's the media manager for the disability charity Scope. First of all, Stephanie, let's just identify what's been said or sung, as it were, because this is on a new album that's sort of come from the States, so they've got a slightly different perspective on this.
Yes, I heard you guys talking about it in the paper review. So the S word, I'm not going to say it for you.
No.
But the S word in urban world kind of means to wild out, to be flamboyant, to kind of freak out, as it is.
Losing control.
Yeah, losing control, whether it's on the dance floor, in life. And so the reason why I think Beyoncé hasn't actually apologised about this is because ignorance has been bliss in her world, in the sense where she wasn't actually saying it as a derogatory term, which is quite surprising because it was only a few weeks ago that Lizzo was actually slammed for using that in one of her tracks called Girls, and she apologised for it, where Beyoncé hasn't apologised, but she said she will re-record the song and removed the lyrics.
But the album's been released already, though, hasn't it?
It was released last week, Friday, and it's set to chart this week. So I know it's going to be a big issue for people such as Apple, Spotify, and all the streaming services, because they're going to have to get rid of that version and add a new one. But then it begs the question, what's going to happen with the people who already have bought the album and have heard such lyrics?
OK, well, let's bring in Warren Cohen from Scope this morning. Very good to see you. Lots of our viewers and listeners this morning quite exercised by this. Their view is that music is artistic. We should be free to express ourselves. And when you start to censor things to affect people's offence, then it doesn't become expressive and we're not living in a free society. Do you see that there is an argument there to be had?
I see where they're coming from and I see why they've made that argument and that debate. I would question if this was a similar word about race or gender, would we be having the same debate? Would they be making the same argument? I suspect they probably wouldn't. And the same issue will probably go for the writers of that song.
I would suggest there are a lot of misogynistic words used in music at the moment, which we aren't insisting are all removed from all of our playlists. And, you know, it's whether or not you choose to be offensive, but perhaps just choose not to listen to that track if it offends you.
So let's go back to where this word came from. This S word has long been opposed by disabled people in this country. We changed our name 30 years ago. Disabled people said that was a really offensive term. We should not use it. And actually, our words matter. They count. They impact on attitudes. They impact on how we perceive disabled people. They impact on what we think disabled people can do and should do. And actually, a lot of people speaking out about this are disabled people. And one of the great things is I think we're getting better at speaking out and saying, actually, this is not acceptable.
I mean, there is a word, spasticity, which is used by the medical profession to describe what affects 80%, I think, of people with cerebral palsy, where it affects the muscle control and so on. Should we actually have put that out and be quite clear about it to avoid it becoming this colloquial term in the States particularly, where people don't actually understand what's going on to those people with a condition?
Well, I think first and foremost, most people don't want to be defined by their condition. Most people want to be defined by who they are. Right. They want to get up, go to work, have a job, have a family, pay the mortgage off. They don't want to be defined by a specific condition or a medical condition.
It's the whole thing with the disabled and a disabled person.
Yes.
It's that difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not defining by somebody by one of their characteristics, but who they are as their character and their person and what they want to do and what they want to achieve in life. And I think disabled people have long campaigned not to be seen as a medical description. And to be seen as a human being and as a person.
But Warren, sorry, I want to bring Stephanie back in on this, because Warren was saying there that, you know, very much in this country, this word has certain medical connotations. But as you were alluding to, in particularly African-American culture, it has totally different meaning. Are we now living in an era where record labels in the States or wherever they may be will have to look at the lyrics that their artists are using and see if any of those cause offence in any of the possible countries where that is bought? And therefore, what are the implications for that? If artists then have to re-record, retract material all over the world. I mean, it has huge implications.
But the thing is, I think as well now, like, look at the backlash now, because it almost spoils a moment for Beyonce with her new album coming out. So as much as it's about freedom of speech, we know how cancel culture has been so big recently that it's not even worth it using such words. But the thing is, both artists and both fans have become very desensitised now. It's like the N-word that's used in rap music all the time. It's now used so casually. It is a racist, derogative term. But now people use it as a term of endearment. But now you can't get away with such things. So there has to be a change. So
is the recording or the recording industry a little bit, what should we say, naive? I'm just looking at what Beyonce's spokesperson said. The word was not used intentionally in a harmful way, which is not actually recognising using it, as we've heard, is actually harmful.
To be honest, there's been probably loads of artists that have used this word, but because it's an artist like Beyonce, everyone's woken up and paid attention to it. So there's probably Lizzo, Beyonce, those kind of sort of people, they can't get away with it. But a well-unknown artist can get away with it. So it begs to differ who it's coming from. And because it's coming from Beyonce...
There's a different weight.
But I'm glad that this has actually happened, because it's education for all of us. Because, you know, if it's not brought into the limelight, we won't know.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to bring you, Warren, a couple of the emails that we're getting in here, just whilst we've been having this discussion. So this is from Bernard Carney. He says, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. This is a few campaigners stopping freedom of speech. Colin McAlpine, the world of wordplay is completely pathetic. People do not live their lives worrying about words. Sticks and stones, also using that analogy. Get over yourselves. We are a worldwide laughingstock.
Well, we've just completed the largest ever survey of disabled people's experiences, and attitudes have a massive impact on disabled people's lives.
Yeah.
So not only, and they make it harder for people to go to school, go to work, get in education, use public transport, and actually we found that surprisingly it affects younger people much more. So when these attitudes and these words that have really negative stereotypes about disabled people are reinforced by a global superstar, that has an impact. So this isn't just an academic debate we're having. It's a real-world impact on real disabled people who just want to get on and live their lives.
What would you say to Beyoncé and her decision to change it all?
I think credit where credit's due. I think recognise you made a mistake, coming out and changing it. An apology would be nice, but actually recognising the mistake is very good.
Yeah. OK, and, well, we haven't heard the record yet, so we'll see if there's any good.
It actually is a good song,
oh,
and
it's
a great album. And, you know, Beyoncé's always been about inclusivity, so that's why it's a shame that this has happened.
OK. Thank you both very much indeed for your time.
Thank you both very much indeed. We'll have more from all the views on this subject for you a little bit later on in the programme. We'll also be talking about a developing story overnight.
Yes, international news and White House and the news of the killing of the head of Al-Qaeda. More on that coming up. First, though, weather details for you.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Eamonn McGivern from the Met Office. It's a gloomy and in places damp start to the day. A breezy day to come as well, but that breeze coming from the southwest will make it feel humid, and in fact it's going to be a hot day in the southeast. Now, weather fronts have been moving in across northern and central parts of the country overnight, and they'll continue to progress eastwards. They contain a lot of cloud and some heavy rain at first, especially for northern England into North Wales, that continuing through the morning before eventually easing away to the east. Nevertheless, it stays cloudy, it stays breezy, it stays damp in places, particularly northern and western England as well as Wales. Brighter skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a few showers in the far northwest where it will be fairly windy here. But towards the southeast, well, avoiding the rain once again and hot and humid with temperatures reaching the high 20s, even 30 Celsius. Low to mid-20s widely across the rest of the UK. And into Tuesday evening, we keep the cloud, we keep the breeze, and as a result, temperatures aren't going to fall very far on Tuesday night. So a warm, uncomfortable night for sleeping for many. And it will stay damp across northwest Scotland into northern and western England as well as parts of Wales. So we start off Wednesday with temperatures of 18 or 19 Celsius, a lot of cloud cover, again a breezy start, risk of gales for exposed parts of northern Scotland first thing. Through the day, an area of, well, showery rain will push across southwest England, South Wales as well, before moving into the Midlands as well as southern counties of England. Not a great deal of rainfall associated with this, and to the far southeast it stays very warm, 28 Celsius. Cooler for Scotland and Northern Ireland, temperatures back towards 18 to 21 Celsius. And Thursday and Friday we'll see that cooler air spread to all parts, but it also turns drier and brighter with just some scattered showers, mainly in the north.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
The US kills the leader of Al-Qaeda.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. It's Tuesday, the 2nd of August, and this is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel Webster and me, Mark Longhurst. And here's what's leading the news this morning.
The leader of Al-Qaeda, Eamonn al-Zawahiri, has been killed in a drone strike in Afghanistan. President Joe Biden's confirmed. The successor to Osama bin Laden was one of the key plotters of the 9/11 attacks in New York.
In the other headlines, former leadership rival Penny Mordaunt has now backed Liz Truss for Prime Minister. The announcement coming ahead of a hustings last night in Exeter, in which Truss and her rival Rishi Sunak faced questions on policing, tax and migration.
And the Court of Appeals refused to postpone the ending of life support for Archie Battersby beyond midday today. The 12-year-old's mother has said that she will fight to the end, vowing to take the case to the UK's highest court.
I'm going to have the latest on that. And don't forget, too, your views on any of the discussions, particularly this issue about Beyoncé and her new album and what she's said or not said. Now, email us gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
So our top story this morning, and this developing news overnight from the States, is that the head of Al-Qaeda, Eamonn al-Zawahiri, has been killed in a drone strike. The US government's confirmed.
Well, speaking in Washington earlier, President Joe Biden said this.
On Saturday, at my direction, the United States successfully concluded an airstrike in Kabul, Afghanistan, that killed the emir of Al-Qaeda, Eamonn al-Zawahiri. Now, justice has been delivered, and this terrorist leader is no more.
Well, joining us now to discuss this is Professor Scott Lucas, a Professor of American Studies at the University of Birmingham. Very good morning to you. Just to give us a sense of how significant this is, not just from President Joe Biden's point of view and the American point of view, but I suppose from the West's point of view.
Well, I think from the point of view of all of us, it would have been really, really significant a decade ago,
right,
when Osama bin Laden was in fact killed. Al-Qaeda as a global force is a spent force. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have local, as you might call it, franchises that have some influence, say in Yemen, say in North Africa. But the idea of a global terror campaign from these folks, they pretty much have faded. Indeed, they had been replaced by other groups, such as the Islamic State, who have been much more significant in recent years. That said, in terms of our lives, for those of us who remember all the way back to 9/11, yeah, it's a significant moment because it sort of, as it were, closes the book on the top leadership of Al-Qaeda. Al-Zawahiri was very important as the ideological force. He's the guy that gave the rationale for all their operations, whereas bin Laden was the more charismatic figure. But again, to be honest with you, once bin Laden, and indeed, even for a few years before bin Laden was killed, Al-Qaeda just simply didn't have the resonance that it carried in the first years of the 21st century.
However, is there a significance that this has taken place in Kabul? Because, of course, the US was warned that pulling their troops out of Afghanistan may lead yet again to a safe haven for terrorists. It seems that that's been proved right.
Well, I think it's significant from the standpoint of how we, consider the Taliban, because the Taliban having taken power last August, having indeed had the experience more than 20 years ago that they were kicked out of power in part because they sheltered al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
They went ahead and let al-Zawahiri come in. But again, to be honest with you, I think the Republicans in the states will try to make political capital about it, but I don't think many Americans will really actually care that much about it. The fact is, the real betrayal in Afghanistan was the betrayal of the Afghan people when the Americans left so quickly.
Although people will be surprised that, you know, the whole invasion into Afghanistan was to eradicate al-Qaeda, and here they are 20 years later, swarming around in Kabul. A lot of people, as you say, will see that as a damning indictment of that withdrawal last year.
Yeah, well, to give you a quick snapshot of how many people were involved in that betrayal of Afghanistan, as it were, by 2003, the idea that we were in Afghanistan to contain al-Qaeda was gone. The fact is that Osama bin Laden was not in Afghanistan. He was then in Pakistan. And the U.S. administration, then a Republican administration, was more concerned about invading Iraq to get rid of Saddam Hussein. So this has been a long-term thing. I don't think, again, I think the Americans or the Biden administration will say we're trying to control terrorism with what they call over-the-horizon strikes. Fact is that Afghanistan was abandoned politically, economically, and socially by the U.S. and by others several months ago.
Administration, because the Republicans have tried to paint him as a weak leader. I'm just looking at the language he used. We will take you out, the warning. It was very sort of Trumpian language, isn't it?
Oh, all American leaders like to play this idea of the fact that, we can deal out justice, as it were. George W. Bush said it in the days after 9/11.
Yeah.
Barack Obama said it in 2011 when Osama bin Laden had been killed. Trump, of course, said it, including the killing of an Iranian leader, General Soleimani. And so Joe Biden uses that language as well. In terms of the reality of this, again, a lot of symbolism here. For those who want to criticize Biden, betrayal of Afghanistan. For those in the Biden administration, hurrah, we've taken out a bad guy. I think as we're in the midst of the Ukraine invasion, in many ways, al-Qaeda is yesterday's story, and we've got bigger crises to deal with right now.
Yeah, lots of crises, not least to the situation with Taiwan as well. Nancy Pelosi, leader of the House in the States, heading over to meet with the Taiwanese. Much criticism coming from the Chinese about that, and they're not happy about it at all. Is that related in any way, do you think? Do you think that this drone strike by the CIA in Kabul is a shot across the bows to say to China, do you know what, we've still got might?
No, I think they're separate issues, but here's something to look out for. The Biden administration also didn't want Nancy Pelosi going to Taiwan because they don't want things to get stirred up there. So you'll notice that a few days ago, Joe Biden had a phone call with Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader. And I suspect Biden said, look, we're not really in favor of this visit. Let's not make a big deal about it. I think the Pelosi visit will come and go without having a real effect on the current position regarding the U.S. and China.
Lucas from the University of Birmingham. Always good to get your thoughts. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.
Thank you, folks.
OK, thanks. Let's talk politics here now with the former leadership candidate Penny Mordaunt backing Liz Truss for leader in the latest blow to Rishi Sunak's campaign.
Yeah, Truss remains the front-runner to win the leadership race after last night's hustings in Exeter and Devon, in which she and her rival Rishi Sunak were quizzed on issues of immigration, policing and the union.
Let's get the views now and reaction with the Deputy Editor of CapX, Alice Denby, joining us in the studio. Thanks for coming in. Lots of confused looks I could see in Exeter when Penny Mordaunt strode up to the lectern and started to speak. Of course, we remember what was described as blue-on-blue attacks, and I think her camp described it as dirty tricks. Suddenly, she and Liz Truss are the best of friends.
Yeah, I think it's significant that quite a few of the leadership candidates are now rowing in behind Liz Truss. She follows Tom Tugendhat and Nadeem Zahawi, and Tom Tugendhat are all backing Liz Truss. They clearly think that she's the front runner. But actually, if you look at the polling, there's only 4 percentage points between them, and 9% of Tory members apparently still undecided. So I think there is still a significant ground campaign going on. And remember, it's so few votes that they're fighting for. This is an electorate of, no one really knows how many Tory members there are, but 160, 200,000. So if you can win over a few votes in that room, that can really...
I mean, Alice, do you believe that poll? That's a private poll that was commissioned, we believe, an Italian pollster by Truss's campaign. And the thought of some of the people we've been speaking to this morning is that perhaps this has been leaked by the Truss campaign to prevent too much complacency, as she does just appear to be such a significant frontrunner. And it perhaps galvanises the members to make sure that they do vote for her, even though they all think it's a done deal.
Yeah, I think, polling is always a weather vane rather than a scientific measure of where things are. But I do think, the fact that this campaign is grinding on, that they're doing so many different hustings, does reflect the fact that they think there is a fight to be had for every single vote. If you remember the previous leadership campaign with Boris Johnson refusing to even do any media because he was so far ahead, he thought doing anything was just a risk. So I think, the fact that they are still really fighting this out.
And how does this tie in with what we were describing yesterday as the postal ballots going out, that basically most of them will have made their minds up already. They'll be putting their names on that form that comes through the letterbox, even though they can change their mind online. This actually tells a different story now.
Yeah, I mean, Tory voters are known for voting early with their postal votes. But yeah, it will be interesting to see if things change as the campaign goes on, because there is this mechanism where you can change your vote online.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. I mean, it does feel like, they keep sort of throwing new policies into the mix to try and change the game. So
yeah, and look, the big headline ones from Truss camp anyway today are trying to cut down civil service. We've also been hearing a great deal about high-fat foods and the tax on
and the bog-off deals, buy one, get one free.
What are the Sunak camp announcing today? Because obviously the big tax announcement yesterday, but I haven't heard actually what he's talking about today. And it seems, doesn't it, as though all the press seems to be behind Truss at the moment.
Yeah, certainly we've seen the Telegraph supporting Liz Truss. That's going to be significant for a lot of Tory members. And as you said, Rishi Sunak pledging to go further on his income tax cuts.
Having to defend them quite significantly, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we'll see. They seem to be finding new policies to kind of bring out of the hat.
But the economy is still the big dividing line. I think the next hustings is Cardiff. I thought it was significant that Liz Truss was talking about the fact that we had the lowest debt of Canada, of Japan, and that would actually be the result of Rishi Sunak as Chancellor. I thought it's a bit of a difficult one to argue that actually, we've got the headroom, if you like, to go for tax cuts, because she is then going to say that is because Rishi Sunak has actually left the economy in a slightly better position than we thought it might have been.
Both these candidates are in a really difficult position, having to sort of both defend the record of the government that they served in and position themselves as change candidates. I think the other thing to note is that even with Rishi Sunak's pledge to cut income tax, even if you factor that in, the IFS says we will still have...
Institute of Fiscal Studies, which are really sort of,
economic think tank, still says that we will have the biggest tax burden since the 1950s, since the days of Attlee. This is the days of state socialism because of that corporation tax rise that he put in.
Up to 25%.
Yeah, so it's very difficult for him to position himself as a tax-cutting chancellor, given his record.
OK, Alice Denby, Deputy Editor of CapEx. Thank you very much indeed. Always good to see you.
Now, the parents of Archie Battersby will today appeal to the Supreme Court over that decision not to delay the withdrawal of his life-preserving treatment for their brain-damaged child any longer.
Well, yesterday, you'll remember, the Court of Appeal refused to postpone the ending of life support for the 12-year-old beyond midday today, despite an urgent request from the United Nations. Well, let's speak to our London reporter who's been covering this story for us throughout. She's outside the Supreme Court for us. Alice, bring us up to date on the latest, because it's become such a complicated legal wrangling, hasn't it, between the family and their lawyers and the doctors in the hospital involved. Now, the Supreme Court were approached last week to get involved, and they didn't want to. They're being approached again by the family in a final bid to try and prevent this from happening. What's likely to be the outcome?
Yes, that's right. The family approached the Supreme Court last week to see if they could sort of intervene and grant them more time. The United Nations had got in touch to say that they'd be putting a request forward to the government, which is exactly what happened. So they said they weren't going to intervene then, but because of this sort of change, I mean, this has been such a rapidly moving case. Every day there's been a sort of twist and turn to it. But because of the way in which the United Nations made a request, a very unusual request to the British government regarding the situation with Archie Battersby, it was on behalf of their Committee for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the government then sort of very, very unusually intervened, and that's why it went to the Court of Appeal yesterday. So I think the family are sort of hoping, and it's very much sort of, I guess, a sort of last-ditch attempt, really, that they've tried the United Nations and usually brought it to the Court of Appeal, which had already been rejected. So they're really, in many ways, sort of grasping at straws here and trying every possible legal avenue. The judge yesterday, Sir Andrew McFarlane, the most senior family court judge in the England and Wales, he didn't grant permission for the family to appeal to the Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the UK. But as we understand it, the family will be appealing against that decision today. They may be coming down here in person. I also understand from the charity, the Christian charity which is supporting the family, they will also be putting pressure, I guess, on the Health Secretary, Stephen Barclay, and asking why he's not done more to intervene, given the fact that unusually the British government did, because of this intervention from the United Nations, refer the case to the Court of Appeal.
And we heard from the Court of Appeal when they were trying to explain the decision that they are really looking at Archie's best interests, even though obviously this is a terrible position for the parents. They are looking at the medical evidence that they've been presented with about what he's going through at the moment.
Yes, and I think that the phrase, what is in Archie's best interest, is something that has kept coming up, and I think that was something Sir Andrew McFarlane sort of said yesterday, that this is something that has been categorically said not once but twice in the High Court, that it is in Archie's best interest to have his life support machine switched off. Either it was yesterday, but it's now due to be midday today. Now, watching this or listening to this, you may sort of think, how on earth can you ever argue that it could be in anyone's best interest to have a life support machine switched off? But I have to say, there have been doctors that have given multiple testimonies that have all agreed that Archie is brainstem dead, but more than that, that actually there is many aspects of his current condition that is very worrying, I suppose, to doctors, that he could have organ failure at any minute. There's concerns about his malnutrition, that every part of his bodily function is being artificially looked after by various means of medical support. And as Mr. Justice Hayden said, he was the second High Court judge to look at this. The concern was that this ongoing treatment was protracting his death rather than prolonging his life, and therefore they was not showing some dignity to Archie. That's very much the hospital's point of view within this, and that's why they are arguing and have continued to argue that his life support machine should be switched off. But that is absolutely not what the parents want, and a letter was sent to both parents of Archie Battersby with a sort of bullet point sort of looking through exactly how the medication would be withdrawn, how the ventilator will be taken off here. And whilst there was lots in there that shows the hospital are trying to support their family in some ways, it was a really hard read as an outsider. I can only imagine for the parents how difficult it must be that that's not what they want. They want their son to die in a way that they say is, quotes, natural, i.e. not given a specific time, certainly not a court-mandated time in which doctors will be able to remove everything that's keeping Archie alive. So it's very much not what the family want to do. And from my understanding today, having spoken to the charity that are supporting the family, they will fight to the absolute bitter end to keep their son on a life support machine.
OK, Alice Porter at the Supreme Court, thank you very much.
It's just coming up to 8:18. Let's bring you up to date with the latest headlines this hour.
The Tory leader candidate Liz Truss has promised a war on Whitehall waste if she becomes Prime Minister. The Foreign Secretary has pledged a leaner, more efficient civil service, whilst the other candidate, Rishi Sunak, says his economic plan is one of the most far-reaching initiatives to cut income tax that people have seen.
British Airways is reportedly suspending the sale of its short-haul flights from Heathrow for at least a week. The Times newspaper reporting that the airline has now suspended ticket sales for domestic and European services until and including Monday is to comply with Heathrow's cap on passenger numbers.
Hundreds of thousands of people with type 1 diabetes in England will soon have access to a life-changing gadget. There'll be no need for a scan or finger prick test to track their blood sugar levels. NHS England says a new arm tech will send that information to a mobile phone app at all times. Now, just before 8 o'clock, we were talking about the track by Beyoncé that has ruffled a lot of feathers. Campaigners in the disability world have asked for it to be changed, one of her songs, which used an ableist slur, and Beyoncé has agreed to that, hasn't she?
Yes, it's the new album, which they're trying to get back from the digital services and reissue. Plenty of your views coming in. Let's just reflect first from Mo. Neither Beyoncé nor Lizzo, who's another artist, said to have used the same term and withdrew that, should have changed S... is not a slur in black culture. We simply cannot let folks dictate how we talk.
Well, Brett Wilkin has got in touch. He says, as a disabled person, I really don't care. And Steve Edwards has said, as a disabled person and a polio survivor, I had these names used against me during my life. They didn't kill me, they made me stronger. But on the other hand, Jenny's got in touch this morning. Thank you, Jenny, for getting in touch. She says, I can promise you it is absolutely a slur used to insult people who have movement disorders, seizures, ADHD, autism and Tourette's and many other disabilities. Just because you personally have never heard anyone use it in a derogatory manner does not mean it is not a slur. And I have to say, our inbox has gone wild with this story. People really exercised one way or the other. So do keep your thoughts coming in this morning. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
But certainly that track withdrawn and reissued, so clearly they've taken notice. Coming up, Liz Truss revealing she plans to put a stop to junk food tax, but what will that do for the country's obesity crisis? We're discussing that issue with Dr. Frankie. First, though, latest weather.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a gloomy and in places damp start to the day. A breezy day to come as well, but that breeze coming from the southwest will make it feel humid, and in fact it's going to be a hot day in the southeast. Now, weather fronts have been moving in across northern and central parts of the country overnight, and they'll continue to progress eastwards. They contain a lot of cloud and some heavy rain at first, especially for northern England into North Wales, that continuing through the morning before eventually easing away to the east. Nevertheless, it stays cloudy, it stays breezy, it stays damp in places, particularly northern and western England as well as Wales. Brighter skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a few showers in the far northwest where it will be fairly windy here. But towards the southeast, well, avoiding the rain once again and hot and humid with temperatures reaching the high 20s, even 30 Celsius. Low to mid-20s widely across the rest of the UK. And into Tuesday evening, we keep the cloud, we keep the breeze, and as a result, temperatures aren't going to fall very far on Tuesday night. So a warm, uncomfortable night for sleeping for many. And it will stay damp across northwest Scotland into northern and western England as well as parts of Wales. So we start off Wednesday with temperatures of 18 or 19 Celsius, a lot of cloud cover. Again, a breezy start, risk of gales for exposed parts of northern Scotland first thing. Through the day, an area of, well, showery rain will push across southwest England, South Wales as well, before moving into the Midlands as well as southern counties of England. Not a great deal of rainfall associated with this, and to the far southeast it stays very warm, 28 Celsius. Cooler for Scotland and Northern Ireland, temperatures back towards 18 to 21 Celsius. And Thursday and Friday we'll see that cooler air spread to all parts, but it also turns drier and brighter with just some scattered showers, mainly in the north.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. It might be coming up to 8:30, but we've got a packed programme still to come for you this morning. At 8:45, we'll be speaking to a key ally of Liz Truss. That is the one and only Jacob Rees-Mogg. We'll be talking about the Foreign Secretary's plans to cut Whitehall red tape.
Also hearing, of course, from Team Rishi, Dr. Liam Fox on that side, joining us just after 9.
And at 9:15, as a new parliamentary report is released into body image and mental health, we'll be speaking to the star of The Only Way is Essex, who's now calling out the pressure on plastic surgery.
Well, don't forget you can join us to all those discussions. Email us, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tweet us at GB News. Plenty of views coming on Beyoncé this morning.
Absolutely. Now, Liz Truss has said she's going to stop planned taxes on unhealthy foods as she continues to back the cutting of government red tape.
It comes as new data has revealed that obesity rates are once more rising in the poorest parts of England. Now, the cost of living crisis, it seems, has increased the price of fruit and vegetables, of course, and it's forced many families on budgets to turn to ready meals or fast food options and junk food, of course.
Well, to tell us more is the NHS doctor and personal trainer, Dr. Frankie Jackson-Spence. We've added that in. I didn't know you were a personal trainer as well as style guru and all the above. But look, this is really worrying when, we're seeing the most deprived areas struggling the most with this problem. And then there's the talk from future PM potentially about cutting those good value deals, but on junk food. So what's the answer in all of this?
So that's a really complicated question, isn't it? What is the answer? I don't think there is a single answer. I think that obesity is a really complex issue, which is caused by lots of factors, our environment, food being one of them. For many people, they feel it's easier to eat unhealthy food, cheaper, quicker, more convenient. And also, we're much more sedentary than we were even 20 years ago.
Yeah, we all suffered from lockdown lumps, didn't we? Which, perhaps we couldn't avoid. But, I mean, the other aspect is that it's the cost of actually buying healthy food. And is that the food industry's fault that the ready meals, full of salt and fat and sugar, seem to be the most approachable things for people on a budget?
I think it's really difficult because actually eating healthily and cooking from scratch can often be cheaper.
Right.
But many people don't necessarily have the time or don't have the education and necessarily the skill set to do it. Or even, some people don't even have the means to cook a meal. They may not have all the, microwave or oven and things like that. So we can't be naive to think that it is equal for everyone, and people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are worse affected. But I think the focus needs to be on, instead of kind of condemning unhealthy foods and, increasing tax on them or banning advertising, there needs to be more education and more motivation for people to pick the healthier option and increase the accessibility of that. So, increasing the cost of unhealthy food by 20p or something, maybe some advertising of why that is, or suggesting a healthier option rather than just increasing the price or changing advertising.
Education always the answer when it comes to these types of things. But the impact of obesity on health is huge. It links to cancer, heart disease. NHS really struggling with an obesity crisis.
Yeah, I mean, since 1993, obesity rates have doubled. So that is people with a BMI of 30 or above. It's gone from around 13% to 26, 27%. So that is huge in the last 20 years. And, you know, obesity isn't all cosmetic. There's a huge body positivity movement at the moment, and it isn't. These conversations aren't because of cosmetic reasons. Obesity has a huge toll on our long-term health. It increases your risk of type 2 diabetes 5 times. It increases the risk of certain cancers like breast cancer or bowel cancer up to 3 times that of someone who's of a healthy BMI.
Heart conditions.
Heart conditions, high blood pressure, strokes, and even things that you might not think about, like increasing your risk of arthritis or things like sleep apnea and getting a bad night's sleep. Basically, any health condition, obesity can contribute to.
So given this, what should a government do? What should a new Prime Minister do? Because, of course, a lot of people will say we don't want a nanny state telling us what to do, how to do it and so on. But if it's having such an impact on the health service and on us individually, should there be a role for a government saying this is what we need to do?
I don't know what the answer is in terms of what the government should do, but there certainly needs to be investment and funding in a public health initiative, whether that is changing advertising or changing...
We had 5 a day, didn't we? That worked quite well.
Yeah, that was relatively successful. Yeah. And, you know, the sugar tax, which came in 2018, has reduced consumption of those sugary drinks. We just don't know the effect that's actually had on obesity levels. So I don't know the answer, but there does need to be something. So whilst these statements saying, you know, we're not going to take away these buy one get one free offers, that's fine, but there needs to be something else.
But medically, you know, we talk about obesity having doubled since 1993, but there will be people watching this, probably in a minority when it comes to obese people, but who will have hereditary reasons why they struggle with weight, and it's not always because people who are overweight are gouging themselves on junk food. And I think medically that's probably an important point to make.
I think it's a huge misconception that people who are overweight, it's all to do with choice or laziness or lack of motivation to be a healthy weight. Obesity is very complex, and I think our current environment sets us up to be overweight. It is very difficult to maintain a healthy weight in this country with convenience foods, with having more sedentary lifestyles. And that is proven by the fact that 60% of adults in the UK are in the overweight or obese category. So more people are overweight than not.
And is that attached to this, the measurement, the BMI index?
Yes.
Right.
And I think going back to these other reasons people can be obese, there is genetic conditions. They're fairly rare, but there's certainly genetic predispositions to people having bigger appetites than others. We have hunger and full hormones, and there can be different levels in different people. And there are some medical conditions like an underactive thyroid or polycystic ovarian syndrome that can make it very difficult to lose weight. So it's a complex picture, and it certainly isn't to do with people's motivation or
being lazy about healthy food. Yeah, indeed.
Okay, Dr. Frankie Jackson-Spence, always good to get your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, after the break, we'll be going through the papers this morning. We're joined by Emily Carver and John McTurn. It's been pretty lively all morning with them, hasn't it?
Absolutely, yes. And I've seen them out there. They're busy with more notes, so we're for it in a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes.
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. It's 8:34, if I can read the clock correctly. Let's bring you up to date with the latest headlines. Well, from the States, we've heard that US officials have said that the al-Qaeda leader Eamonn al-Zawahiri has been killed in the CIA drone stroke in Kabul in Afghanistan. The White House calling it a successful counter-terrorism operation. The militant group's founder, Osama bin Laden, you remember, was killed by US forces in Pakistan back in 2011.
The former Tory leadership candidate Penny Mordaunt's backing Liz Truss as the next Prime Minister. The ex-rival says Truss is the hope candidate in the race against Rishi Sunak. Her endorsement came ahead of a hustings last night in Exeter, where the candidates face questions over policing, tax and migration.
Well, in the other news, Archie Battersby's life support treatment is set to be switched off at midday today. The Court of Appeal judges will not be allowing an appeal against their decision at the Supreme Court, but the 12-year-old's parents say they will fight to stop his ventilator from being switched off. Archie's been in a coma since April.
OK, time to go through the papers one last time this morning. Emily Carver, John McTurnan joining us for that. It is, of course, holiday season. Lots of people going on their holidays or trying to return from there. The front page, though, on the Times this morning, BA having to suspend ticket sales, all to fulfil the Heathrow Airport cap on passenger numbers.
Yes. Heathrow made the decision that they'll only have 100,000. They'll cap passenger numbers at 100,000. So this means that BA has had to suspend many ticket sales, which, of course, will massively eat into their profits because they make a lot of money from last-minute deals, last-minute bookings, that sort of thing. And, of course, it's not good for consumers either because the prices will go up.
Well, yeah, the fact that you won't have the choice to go, and then if you do try and get away and get a ticket, it's going to cost you a lot more.
Yeah, the prices will go up, but it's a trade-off, isn't it? Because this means that you won't have the problem of overbooking as much as you do currently, and hopefully it means that staff will be able to ensure that luggage actually gets on the plane and gets to your destination, which wasn't the case for my brother and his girlfriend.
Oh, really?
Yes, for their entire holiday, they didn't have any of their luggage. And that was
many
BA.
bad stories.
So I think that...
Or the ground agents, we should say.
Yes, but they belong... I think they belong to the airlines, the staff.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But, I mean, there was actually... there was a bit of a sort of fight back, wasn't it? Emirates, the airline at Heathrow, really took the airport to task for this. And there was a real spat, wasn't there, between the airport and the airlines?
The airports know they need staff, and they know it takes a long time to give the security background check that you need. And they just can't have been listening to their own staff and their own community, their own friends. Everybody knew the demand for holidays would come back, would mushroom this summer. As soon as we were free, people wanted to travel, and I think the airports are really forcing onto the airlines the cost of their own mismanagement. But they're monopolies, really, aren't they?
Something's quite interesting in this article as well that I've just read here. BA has been artificially inflating prices on some routes to deter bookings for a while now. For example, London to Edinburgh has been north of £400 one way. So I'm sure viewers at home, perhaps who wanted to fly to Scotland, may have been put off by that.
London City to Nice, August the 8th, £814.
Yeah, but as our executive producer will tell you, who recently travelled back home to Scotland on the train because the flights were so
Not much
extortionate,
cheaper, yeah.
everything being cancelled, 3 carriages reduced to 1. It took her 14 hours instead of whatever it was supposed to be. She had a nightmare. So it is difficult getting about these days. John, let's turn our attention to the front page of the Financial Times, page 2 in the FT. And this is an interesting story about trying to stem dirty money.
Yeah, for more than 10 years, people have said that the London housing market is the equivalent of a Swiss bank account for organised crime. Because you can buy property in London, it's got great value, it's been rising in value, and nobody's really know who owns what and why. And there's been a big pressure on undisclosed wealth orders, which have not been that successful. And now it's like, OK, declare who owns. Who owns this property, and let's actually have some transparency. It's taken too long, but it's a good start. And I think we're going to start to open up this question of where's the money come from?
Yeah, and it's not just dirty money, it's clean money as well. I mean, obviously the Russian oligarchs were those who were blamed for inflating London house prices. We're now told that the Chinese are
middle classes,
because they see it as a safe haven.
It was two things for Chinese people. It's outside China. So it's like a bank account outside China. The government can't touch it. And it's a way of securing it against any inflation or any exchange rate problems. So, the Chinese middle classes are big homeowners in Australia, in Canada, and now in London and other housing markets.
Speaking of China and the situation in Hong Kong, Emily, Telegraph focusing on that, the restriction of visas for young Hong Kongers is being relaxed.
Yes, so apparently many of the campaigners in Hong Kong were very young, and they had to apply for visas with their parents. But now they're relaxing that. So those from 18 can come to the UK without their parents, which wasn't the case before, because apparently 9 in 10 people who faced protest charges in Hong Kong from the Chinese government have been too young to access the visa scheme. And now more than 10,000 people, that's a huge number of people who essentially are being targeted by the regime over there, and they can seek safe haven here now. Of course, the government needs to, I would argue, sort out our housing crisis if they go to...
So we could have an influx of young Hong Kong pro-democracy campaigners who seem to have given up now in Hong Kong. They've lost the battle there.
Yeah, and in terms of, if you look at things in terms of economics, this could be a real boon for our economy, because it's likely that these young people are highly educated, highly skilled, and could be productive in our workforce. And then from a freedom-minded point of view and a democracy-minded view, this is a good thing in terms of supporting freedom and supporting people who want
Which was from what was a Crown Protectorate.
Yes,
of course,
exactly. And we, people say that we have a duty to the Hong Kong people for that very reason. But yes, it's an interesting one, because I worked and lived in Hong Kong for about a year, and all of those who I were with in terms of expats and also some Hong Kongers who grew up there have all left.
Same. Everyone I know who's lived or worked there has left. It's very sad to see what's happened in Hong Kong. Although a huge number now, as we've been talking about. I'm not sure what the total is if you include those over the previous cap on age, but it's, over 100,000?
Yeah, and look, Emily's right. It's great for our economy, and it's actually a good example of global Britain and the values of a global Britain.
And this is one of Tony Blair's messages. Net migration actually can be an economic boom.
It can. Just look at what's happened to Vancouver in Canada. They took a lot of Hong Kong Chinese the first time round, and it's made that a boom town.
Yeah. OK, we're on to housing reform. The Guardian, the end of this mortgage stress test. The Bank of England, I'm trying to work out why they're doing this when they had such trouble with bad loans.
Well, it seems like it's not quite the right time. Does the left hand know what the right hand's doing?
Yeah.
This is a situation where we know interest rates are going to rise. Emily's IEA have published a report about interest rates. We know interest rates are going to be rising. Why would you expose younger people to a risk? If you want younger people into home ownership, this seems like a very silly way into it. Let's have other policies that support young people into home ownership, but let's not expose people to risk when interest rates are definitely on the up for a while.
Because I think it was 3%, wasn't it, was the sort of Bank of England indication of you could manage up to that, but they could go even higher than that.
The only thing I would say is that I think it's good for them to look at affordability in different ways, because so many young people are paying more than they would be on mortgage payments on rent. So to rent a smaller property than you would buy, you're paying more a month anyway. So it's very frustrating for young people who just can't quite get that deposit together, but could afford the mortgage repayments, no problem. So that is frustrating.
Those interest rates being announced by the Bank of England on Thursday. And I know from personal experience, people who are trying to get mortgage offers at the moment, absolutely backed up, impossible to get them. And actually, I think many of the lenders honouring mortgage applications into next week with the old interest rate, just simply to get the numbers through.
Yeah, you used to get a tax break on mortgage payments, didn't you?
That was taken out a long time ago. And it was a big distortion. It was a really big distortion to give more money to those who've got money. It's best to give the most help to those most in need. So I think it was a good thing. A Tory reform, actually. A Lawson reform.
Oh, it was Lawson, not
Lawson.
Right, right.
Well, talking of reforms, prison reform now, Emily, front of the Telegraph today. Dangerous prisoners blocked from automatic release. And this will play well to the audience, the Telegraph audience?
Yes, I think so. A lot of Telegraph readers may well think that our justice system and our prisons are a little bit soft on criminals. Anyway, this is ministers will have new powers to protect the public by blocking dangerous prisoners from automatic release. Now, this is a conflict between judges who give these sentences out and then the government saying that actually, if these people are dangerous, they shouldn't be let out necessarily at the time of the end of their sentence. Some human rights campaigners will say that this is too much power to the government. Others may think, well, we don't want rapists, murderers, violent criminals, terrorists, etc., ever being allowed out. So
I know, and
you'll divide opinion.
We have heard already this morning on our programme about the difficulties the probation service is in as well. Is the infrastructure there to handle this correctly at the moment?
Well, also, prisons are, I believe, at full capacity or over full
or even more,
times. So there is an argument to say, are we putting the right people into prison for the right amount of time? What sort of crimes should warrant a prison sentence? And those who are violent criminals, should they be in there for longer?
So on that, who do you think the next Home Secretary will be? Because it doesn't seem as if it'll be Priti Patel, I wouldn't have thought.
Gosh, I hadn't even thought about the Home Secretary. Who do you think would be hard line enough?
Interesting. Any thoughts?
Wallace?
I think Penny Mordaunt would be a good person if you actually want to focus on rehabilitation. Because in the end, deprivation of liberty is the punishment, but the outcome is somebody who never offends again. And we're really failing on that, and that's a failure of Labour and
successive governments.
Successive governments. Now I know the Home Secretary's only got some responsibilities, but I think somebody like Penny Mordaunt might give the kind of tender but tough approach that you need from the Home Secretary.
Interesting. Let's talk about phonetic memory. Not phonetic in terms of spelling or sounding out, which I spend my life doing with my primary school-age kids, but in terms of phone impacts on our cerebral memory.
Well, so there's some research that's featured in the Times, which will be reassuring for almost everybody who's got a smartphone. That it doesn't rot your memory, and that basically the scientists have said, actually through history we've found different ways to remind ourselves of things that are important. We write lists. They used to be on paper, then they were on post-it notes, now they're on our phones. We give ourselves reminders. We set alarms on our clocks, now on our phones. That actually, to remind yourself, even people used to in the old days, tie a knot in a handkerchief. When people had handkerchiefs.
I don't believe this.
Just looking at my phone, and it's not actually a list as such. You've got to sort of think laterally because you've got apps and you've got this button and that button. So your mind is having to sort of go all over the shop for it. Or maybe that's just me, I don't know.
I think that they've rotted our memory in other ways, though. For example, I don't think children learn their history and dates and things, and they don't put them in their long-term memory as much, I don't think.
Also, I use my phone...
in and out, because it's just... You can look up anything at any time.
And I use my phone as my sat-nav. Even though my car has a sat-nav, I prefer Google Maps because I trust it more. And it means that I don't actually remember the way to anywhere anymore because I always put Google Maps on because I want live traffic updates.
Yeah.
And so I think it's rotted that part of my memory.
Yeah, because I have a French car, and the sat-nav and the phone recognition, you have to speak like Inspector Clouseau. Otherwise,
well,
it doesn't
that's
work.
probably good for
It'd
you.
be a lassance, a monkey. That seems to work. Anyway.
So we question who commissioned this research. Was it a phone company, perhaps?
No, I think
Apple sponsored it.
I think this is worried scientists reassuring themselves.
Right. The papers are having one last hurrah too with the football. Plenty of the front pages with these great photos. I mean, it's not just that the team seems to be playing on the pitch better than them, and they seem to be able to celebrate better as well. Would that be a fair reflection?
Oh yes, there were all sorts of articles and commentary about.
Because I see you've gone for the ponytail look yourself this morning, which the lionesses.
I do look a bit like a lion with this hair. Yes, there was lots of commentary around the fact that they don't. There wasn't as much drinking and bad behaviour and, mooning going on as there is sometimes when England does well or badly. I remember when England were in the Euros, the men's team, was it the Euros? Anyway, the shops were being looted when they lost eventually, and there was all sorts going on. I was in London Bridge at the time, and it was raucous to say the least. Anyway, this looks like family-friendly, lovely fun, because women, of course...
And because a lot more kids are involved. Yeah, but the kids are involved as well, which makes a big difference, I guess. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's probably a bit more family-minded.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. John, what do you make of this, what some papers are describing, number 10 snub in terms of recognition from the PM?
Yeah, look, if I'd been a number 10, the first thing we would have done was get in the football team. You want to celebrate national success. We had the England cricket team in. They've been drinking all night. They then came in, they drank number 10 dry. They played on little Leo's play equipment. But it was the right thing to do. When you get a big national sporting triumph, you want the Prime Minister, you want number 10 to be opened.
So was it maybe Carrie saying, I'm not having those people in here again wrecking the play equipment in the back garden? Well, keep the sports people away.
I think sometimes that we expect too much of our Prime Ministers in terms of following sport. I don't believe Boris Johnson follows football. I think there are a lot of people who don't follow the football, either the men's football or the women's football. But I think probably in terms of being the leader of the nation.
OK. All right. Well, John McTernan, Emily Carver, it's been a pleasure going through the papers with you both this morning. We can speak now to Jacob Rees-Mogg. He is the Minister for Brexit Opportunities and Government Efficiency. And I might put that question to you first, Mr Rees-Mogg. Was this a snub from number 10, not having the Lionesses grace the premises, or is it just scheduling problems?
It's definitely not a snub. I mean, look, I know absolutely nothing about football, but I must confess I'm always delighted when England win. And I was very amused to hear you saying that they were very much better behaved. I do seem to remember when we won the Ashes in 2005 for the first time since the late 1980s, the behaviour in Downing Street left something to be desired, and I'm sure the Lionesses wouldn't have done that.
We'll reflect, of course, on Exeter last night and the surprise, if it was, Penny Mordaunt coming out in terms of, I think, your chosen candidate, Liz Truss. Maybe a lot of people scratching their heads thinking, hold on, we heard about blue-on-blue attacks and the Mordaunt camp saying there's been dirty tricks, and suddenly they're best of friends again.
Well, I think that tells you something about the Conservative Party. We are ultimately all on the same side. We want to win elections and we want to keep the socialists out because we think they'd be ruinous for the country. And whoever wins in the end will have loyal support from Conservative members up and down the country. And Penny has showed that, and shown that, to my mind, with considerable grace.
A poll that has been conducted by your campaign, we're told privately, which puts Rishi Sunak just 5 points behind Liz Truss, which may surprise many, given not only the number of big beasts now endorsing her campaign, but also just the word that we're getting loud and clear, certainly from the membership, about who is their favourite. Is this just a case of trying to perhaps leak a poll that might prompt people to vote to make sure that there's no complacency here?
I'm sure not. There are quite strict rules that pollsters adhere to. There's a code of conduct for pollsters to stop people leaking polls that they think may have a particular desired effect, and it requires information to be published and so on, and the details of the poll have been published. And I believe it wasn't actually commissioned by Liz Truss, but her campaign was aware of it. But it is a reminder that elections aren't won until people have cast their votes and the votes are counted. And it's really important that every supporter of Liz Truss votes in this election.
Looking ahead to the fact it's not just the party leadership campaign, it will also be a new Prime Minister. This was Exeter last night, just down the road from Tiverton and Honiton, who of course returned a Liberal Democrat MP. Many people may be asking, why would you want someone who is a former Liberal Democrat now leading your party?
Well, I think it shows great wisdom to be able to change your mind, that if you discover that your opinion is wrong, what do? Do you bash on with the wrong opinion for years and years, or do you say, I have seen the error of my ways and I've seen the truth of conservatism? And Liz Truss has realised that conservatism is better for the country. I think that's admirable. And it has to be said, I grew up in a pretty Tory household and I ended up being a Tory. Whether I would have been a Lib Dem if I'd grown up in a Lib Dem household must be a moot point.
Challenge in the southwest, haven't you, from that party?
The Conservative Party is always challenged by different parties. You can never take electoral success for granted, and we have to govern well. The key to being re-elected is that we get the right economic policy, and this is where I think Liz is so strong, that she has policies that will both deal with the cost of living and take the burden off people by keeping taxes down, rather than promising tax cuts in the long-term future.
I want to talk about this war that's being declared on Whitehall waste. I suppose from a Foreign Secretary's point of view, perhaps unfortunate turn of phrase that's been used by some of those briefing for her. But wanting to save billions in this area, lower salaries, it's suggested, for civil servants outside the capital. Angela Rayner saying this is hardly levelling up, is it?
Well, you wouldn't expect Angela Rayner to support a Conservative policy. It'd be quite a revelation.
But it's not levelling up.
If she ever did. But yes, it is. There's already a London allowance, so people working in London get paid more. This is simply formalising this, and it's for new employees. It's not for people currently civil servants. It's to say the government will pay the market rate. And surely that's right, because you don't want the government to crowd out local businesses, and you don't want the government to spend more taxpayers' money than is necessary. But anybody currently employed as a civil servant will remain on their current pay rate.
A return, if we may, to the central issue between the two, the economy and how we look at things going forward. I thought it was quite interesting that Liz Truss, again in the hustings in Exeter, pointed out that we have lower debt ratios than Canada and Japan, and actually heralding that fact. But that's down to Rishi Sunak, isn't it?
Well, actually, if you take account of quantitative easing, which is £875 billion of money that the government owes to itself, we have a debt-to-GDP ratio of below 60%. And if you want to credit to anybody, the person this should be credited to is George Osborne. The work George Osborne did between 2010 and 2016 meant that we were able to afford the pandemic. So the money we spent, the £408 billion on the pandemic, would not have been affordable without the way George Osborne handled the economy. And I think he hasn't got enough credit for his very important work.
So does that mean we're back to austerity with the new Prime Minister?
No, it doesn't, but you should always ensure that taxpayers' money is spent well. But the programme of austerity that George Osborne followed left the public finances in a state where we could afford a crisis. And so that was a very successful policy and has led to our current economic strength. Economic policies have quite a long period before they come to fruition, and I think we need to apportion the credit correctly.
And finally, Mr. Rees-Mogg, you're one of the few that we saw publicly anyway, going to the wedding party of Boris Johnson at the weekend. I wondered if you might tell us a little bit about it, something that we don't already know. And I wonder if perhaps Nadeem Dorries, who also attended, had any comments about your double-breasted suits, perhaps.
Well, I can tell you one thing about this double-breasted suit is it's 20 years old. So that the great thing about traditional English tailoring is that it lasts.
Okay,
but I'm afraid I'm afraid I'm going to duck that question. It was a private party. It was a very happy occasion, but the leaking culture is bad enough within government, but for private events, I think goes a bit beyond the pale. So forgive me, but I won't gossip.
OK, fair enough. Look, lovely to talk to you. Jacob Rees-Mogg, Minister for Brexit and Government Efficiency. Thank you very much.
Suit still looks pretty good too. I'll tell you a little story, actually. I went to interview a certain Margaret Thatcher once.
Oh, yeah.
And this was back in the 90s when double-breasted suits were in vogue.
Yeah.
And I turned up mob-handed with you know, the sort of director's assistant, sound man, the whole bit. And I was there with my jacket undone. Margaret Thatcher came up to me, my dear boy, you must always have a double-breasted suit jacket done up, and did my button up. And I completely lost all authority. I thought, what a clever woman.
Yeah,
you know, that
she
was
treated you like a little boy.
Yeah, like Mark Thatcher, you know, and that was it. I was done for. There we are.
What an anecdote. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
And no offence to you, Jacob. I think they're coming back. You've held on to it so long. The double-breasted
or they've
suits
never
are
gone
back
away.
in. Anyway, that was Team Truss. After the break, we'll be speaking to Team Rishi. Dr. Liam Fox will be here, and we'll also go to be down at the Great British Beer Festival.
Looking forward to that, yeah, in a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel. Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Truss and Sunak face off at the latest leadership hustings in Exeter.
Good morning. It's just after 9 o'clock on Tuesday, the 2nd of August. This is Breakfast on GB News with Isabel, Webster and Mark Longhurst. Here's what's leading our news this morning.
Well, the former leadership rival Penny Mordaunt has now backed Liz Truss to be Prime Minister. That announcement coming ahead of the hustings last night in Exeter, in which both Liz Truss and rival Rishi Sunak face questions on policing, tax and migration.
The leader of Al-Qaeda, Eamonn al-Zawahiri, has been killed in a drone strike in Kabul in Afghanistan. The successor to Osama bin Laden was one of the key plotters of the 9/11 attacks.
In other news, the Court of Appeal has now refused to postpone the ending of life support for Archie Battersby beyond midday today. The 12-year-old's mother has said that she will fight to the end and will take the case, she says, to the UK's highest court, the Supreme Court.
And remember, as many of you have been this morning, you can get in touch on email, get involved in the discussions, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Well, more now on that view from Jacob Rees-Mogg in the last few minutes here on GB News, that the economy is doing well because of a certain George Osborne. No mention of Rishi Sunak, because, of course, Mr Rees-Mogg is supporting Liz Truss. We had the hustings last night in Exeter. Tom is with us to give us a bit more reaction to that, because it does seem that even though Liz Truss said we've got the lowest debt of Canada, Japan, it's not all Rishi Sunak's doing as the Chancellor. Mr Rees-Mogg was suggesting, it goes back to George Osborne.
Well, I suppose when it comes to the level of UK debt, the person that did the most consolidation in that area, or at least with regard to the deficit rather than the debt levels, that was Osborne, whereas under Rishi Sunak, of course, the deficit has expanded, but of course there have been international events there as well. The Liz Truss point is, of course, the question of when do you consolidate that debt? When do you try and pay down what was this once in 100 years event of COVID? And it seems that Japan, Canada, America have decided to do that on a longer term footing than the UK has right now. But
and this was her point. Don't try and actually pay off at the moment. Let's extend it and treat this as an emergency or a war debt. Yeah.
Yes, and of course it took until the 2000s that we paid off the Second World War debt in this country. But of course the argument about that, though, is if you change a debt to a longer footing, the expense of that debt does grow. So there is an argument on the Rishi Sunak side there as well. It's a clear distinction between these two candidates. But there's something else, of course, in terms of these polls that we have now seen, this question of whether or not this race is actually tightening. And I have to say that since the time I was in this studio an hour or so ago, I've spoken to the Liz Truss campaign, who dispute the report of the Times.
This is on the front page of the Times.
There's a poll on the front page of the Times. The Times says that this was commissioned by the Liz Truss campaign. I've spoken to the Liz Truss campaign this morning, who say that they did not commission this poll, and they do not know who.
Right, let's just remind people, a private poll conducted for the Foreign Secretary's campaign found that she was now only 5 points ahead of Sunak in the race to secure the support of Conservative members.
And the spokesman from the Liz Truss campaign says, we do not know who commissioned this poll. It wasn't us.
Oh. Right.
Well, the Sunak camp responding to that, saying that this is certainly what they've been hearing on the ground, because the poll also found 8% were undecided. And the quote there being that the Truss support was soft, with many members yet to make up their minds. Rishi Sunak's camp will be very pleased to hear that, because a lot of other polls much less favourable. They were waiting for some more at the moment.
Absolutely. Well, the last poll that we had in this entire race was 12 days ago now, which is an extraordinary amount of time. So a lot has been hinging on the last YouGov poll that there was. Now, this is a poll from this new one that was reported in the Times today is from an Italian company, one that hasn't put forward a poll of Conservative Party members before. There's a lot of discussion about it online. How much can it be trusted, and can it be compared to what another company did with a separate panel of people? What will be really interesting is if there is a further poll by this company next week or so, or another poll by a company that has already polled Conservative Party members. If there's a YouGov poll, for example, we'll be able to see the direction of travel there.
But, Tom, the key question is, we were told that by now many of these Conservative Party members would have made their mind up, because the postal ballots have gone out, that they know where they want to go, even though they've got a chance to change their vote online. But the indication is, actually, no, there are still a rump of people that are undecided.
Yes, certainly. And actually, in that poll 11 or 12 days ago, there was a significant chunk, over 20% undecided. Now, in this poll that we're seeing in the Times today, around 9% undecided. There is still a lot of people who perhaps are weighing up between their heart and their heads. A lot of Conservative MPs that I spoke to in the first stages of this contest really were undecided, because there wasn't a clear runaway favourite at the early stage. It does look like Liz Truss does have the momentum of the endorsements, but still this idea of inevitability doesn't exist in the way that it did, for example,
Boris Johnson.
Yeah. It's a fickle old world, is the world of politics. Tom Harwood, thank you very much indeed for that analysis. Let's just remind ourselves what Jacob Rees-Mogg was saying just a few moments ago. He is, of course, from Liz Truss's campaign, and this is what he was saying about the country's economy.
Have a debt-to-GDP ratio of below 60%. And if you want credit to anybody, the person this should be credited to is George Osborne. The work George Osborne did between 2010 and 2016 meant that we were able to afford the pandemic. So the money we spent, the £408 billion on the pandemic, would not have been affordable without the way George Osborne handled the economy. And I think he hasn't got enough credit for his very important work.
Jacob Rees-Mogg talking to us a few minutes ago. Let's get, in terms of balance, the words from Team Rishi, and let's speak to MP for North Somerset now, Dr. Liam Fox. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I hope you heard what was said there by Mr. Rees-Mogg. It seems that maybe austerity works.
Well, it seems very odd that George Osborne's being given the credit there for a steady approach to spending and taxation, which is exactly what Rishi Sunak is proposing. What Rishi is saying is, yes, we want to see tax cuts, but just as George Osborne would have said, you get control of inflation and borrowing first, then you get growth in the economy, then you get tax cuts which are sustainable in the longer term. I think that is the correct message, and I think that what Jacob was saying there is really a vindication of the policy that's been Conservative economic policy through Geoffrey Howe, through Nigel Lawson, through George Osborne and now through Rishi Sunak, which is you don't borrow for tax cuts. You don't max out on the country's credit card today and leave it to the next generation. You make sure that you've got the public finances sorted, and then you give tax cuts, which, as Mrs. Thatcher said, have to be earned, not given.
We also don't necessarily want to raise taxes during a cost of living crisis, and Rishi Sunak has increased corporation tax.
Well, corporation tax doesn't fall on ordinary domestic consumers, does it? And in any case, we've not seen those changes in corporation tax yet. What we have seen is a windfall tax on the energy companies who showed record profits today, so that we can actually afford to give back some of those reductions to ordinary consumers. It's getting a balance in the economy. Ultimately, if people want to spend money on healthcare and welfare and so on, we either have to get that from taxation or borrowing or growing the economy. I think the sensible way is to grow the economy. I think to borrow at a time when interest rates are rising is actually irresponsible. And remember that our debt interest payment this year is twice as much as we're spending on defence. So clearly we can't max that out any further while still being responsible. So I would also take a leaf out of George Osborne's book, and I would say be sensible, be prudent, go for balanced public finances, and that's the way to sustainable tax cuts in the longer term.
But Dr. Fox, why doesn't Rishi Sunak do a U-turn on corporation tax as he has done on VAT, on fuel, and it seems also on income tax? Because businesses are now preparing for what will be a 6% rise in corporation tax, a tax on their profits to 25%, at a time when Liz Truss and others seem to want growth in the economy, and that will be coming from those companies. They're going to say, we can't afford it if we're paying this extra tax.
Well, about 70% won't be paying that at all, of course, because of the changes in the way that the tax is actually laid out. It's the biggest, most profitable companies that will pay higher rates than the others, much in the same way as we've long accepted higher rates in personal taxation. But the real issue about the economy, I think, is about how you get growth in the economy, and more than growth, I would say, it's about wealth creation. It's dealing with what we call some of the supply side constraints. For example, how do we actually help our smaller companies get the money they require to scale up? Too many of those companies move abroad and take their IP and potential profits with them. Rishi Sunak's been at the forefront of making changes to European law so that we're actually able to see our institutional investors invest in Britain. Why should it be that Canadian pension companies and Spanish pension companies can invest in our British companies, but our own companies are too restricted? We need to make those changes. And these are changes that may not be the most exciting, but they actually make a difference to real businesses. And if Rishi Sunak is anything, he is the Chancellor, the former Chancellor. He's the candidate who believes in those small businesses, that every white van man and woman and every white coat man and woman in the tech sector should see the Tory party as the champion.
Yeah, Dr. Fox, we are almost out of time, but I just want to ask you, I suppose, the elephant in the room in all of this, and that is why the candidate in this race, who was quite clearly the candidate of choice from the MPs, is, it appears at this stage, to be tanking. I read some commentary at the weekend that this was perhaps attributed to some sort of latent racism, but it seems to be generally that this is all to do with his role in bringing down Boris Johnson. What do you think has been the big problem?
But I don't regard any of those things as being correct. The campaign is not tanking. If you look at the poll of actual Conservative councillors at the weekend, there was a 2-point gap with 31% undecided. I think it's the case that Tory party members are a lot more circumspect than a lot of the London media expected them to be. But then we saw that phenomenon in the referendum, we saw it in the 2015 general election. The media in London don't always know best about how people in the rest of the country think and vote, as we will see.
Before we go, Redfield and Wilton strategies, and this is talking about potential prime ministers, because of course it's not just the party leadership. Liz Truss, 37%, Sir Keir Starmer, 36%, at a time when, of course, Rishi Sunak was originally lauded as the best potential prime minister.
And if you look at polls among swing voters, the ones we actually require to win a general election, who's most favoured? Rishi Sunak. So you can take polls, you can dissect them, you can quote poll after poll. The only one that matters is what Conservative Party members do, and they will make up their own minds. I've been the party chairman, I've been in politics for a very long time, and if there's one single-minded group of voters, it's Conservative Party members.
Well, Dr. Liam Fox, it's always good to talk to you. Do remind Rishi Sunak he's very welcome on the programme.
Yes.
Liz Truss has put herself forward.
Anytime.
We've spoken to her. It was the first interview she did was with Breakfast or GB News on TV. We'd love to have Rishi Sunak on the show as well. Do pass our message on.
I think Rishi's been too busy doing Andrew Neil, and so maybe I'm sure the two camps can make a deal.
Well, let's do that.
We'll be a lot better than that, don't you worry.
With the Conservative membership, let me tell you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Right,
Now,
time for a nice cold pint, I think.
I know, this is cruel,
it's gonna be a hot
isn't
day
it?
today.
Yeah. Yes, a taste of the summer, from festivals to barbecues, of course, a British institution. Its origins, of course, dating back to what, Roman conquest?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, cider makers are now arguing that their drink deserves a bit more recognition. In a similar vein to, I suppose, French champagne, producers are now urging the government to differentiate their product from the cheap, mass-produced cider.
But the latest research out this week says that the average pint getting far too expensive. So will the new recognition increase the price further? Let's join our reporter Ellie Costello, joining us from the Great British Beer Festival in Olympia.
Tough gig.
Tough work, but someone's got to do it.
I know, I get all the tough jobs, don't I? You guys have had a long show, but you definitely do deserve a drink. So just live vicariously through me for the next few minutes, why don't you? So welcome to the Great British Beer Festival at Olympia in West London. It's an incredible building here. It opens at midday, which is why I'm wearing this high-vis at the moment. You can see lots of people milling around now, setting up, ready for people to come into the festival. They're expecting 40,000 people here up until Saturday. It's running for the next 5 days. And you can see behind me just some of the beers and ciders that will be available for people to try. Up to 1,000 different brands here from different breweries over the next few days. So let's speak now to Nick Antona. He's the chairman for Campaign for Real Air. Good morning to you, Nick. Thank you so much for joining us. How does it feel to be back for the first time since before the pandemic? First time since 2019?
Yeah, it is, and we're really pleased to be back, and our customers have let us know and they're really pleased to come back, and they're looking forward to arriving from at 12 o'clock today. So definitely a big plus for the drinking beer and cider and perry organisations across Europe and here in the southeast of England.
Yes, so much to look forward to. Now, it's called the Great British Beer Festival, but it's not just about beer, is it? There's also a focus this year on cider, a campaign for quality, if you will. This is about the fruit juice concentration in cider. Have I got that right?
Yes, it is, yes. We carried out a YouGov survey of drinkers out there, and they agree on the whole with us that they would like to see an increase in the quality of cider out there and an increase in the minimum juice content. Currently, it's 35% is the legitimate cider. We would like to see that increase to 65%, so you only have 35% water as part of your drink.
Because what you're finding at the moment is often there's quite a lot of stuff that's not cider in a cider,
yes,
right?
There is. There's all sorts of things. Water, for example, is the main constituent of cider, or the poorer quality cider. So it's about driving up and making sure if you buy a cider, you get cider, and you get what you're buying, apple juice or pear juice in there.
So 52% of people are saying that the cost of a pint now is too expensive. Don't you think if you drive up the quality, you're also going to drive up the price?
For the lower quality ciders, yes, but the range of ciders we've got here are all at least 95% juice, and it's not going to make a difference to them. They're already quality. It's for all those other ciders out there that we want to see the juice content increase so that people get what they buy.
Oh, Nick, it's very, very interesting. Now, I think it would be very rude to be here and not try some of these amazing ciders behind us. 64 different varieties here. I want to bring in Chris at this point here. Chris, you've got 3 for me to try. Can you talk me through?
OK, it's very simple. We've got a dry, a medium and a sweet. And the colour's not relevant to the flavour, but we also have a range of colours. So the first one, which is the dry, is from Temple, down in Dorset. You can. That is
strong,
dry.
isn't it?
It's
Wow.
strong and dry. So,
Wow, 9 o'clock in the morning and I'm on this side. Here we go.
So the second one is from Hex in Somerset, and this is a medium.
Medium. So this might be a little bit sweeter, maybe.
It will be a little bit sweeter.
Okay, cheers. Oh yeah, we're getting there.
We're getting there.
Yeah, lovely. It's smoother.
Much smoother.
Yeah.
And the final one is from Biddington in Kent. So this is a medium sweet.
Medium sweet.
Yes. And also very fruity. So it's much more like a wine.
Lovely. There you are, Chris. That's the one for me. The one that's most like a wine, it would seem. Thank you very much, Chris.
It's a pleasure.
Well, if you like your quality drinks, this is certainly the place to be. Just 64 varieties of cider here, over 1,000 different varieties of beers and ciders all around Olympia. Cheers to you two.
Don't pretend this is the first time you've drunk beer at 9 in the morning. You don't fool us, Ellie.
That's why you're going to wear a high-vis jacket, I expect. There we are. Enjoy.
We're going to take a quick break. After that, we're going to be talking about body image and links to mental health. A new report has said that, well, they're saying it's a terrible problem, and we're going to be speaking to a TOWIE star about that after this.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Now, if you're a Love Island fan, you'll know, of course, it was the big night last night when the winners were crowned, and it saw Ekin-Su and Davide named as the winners of the 2022 series. And it launched, of course, the careers of dozens of influencers and social media stars. But, of course, with fame comes concerns about unrealistic body image expectations that, as we know, have been really detrimental to the mental health of young people.
Yes, a price to pay. Well, now a new report has called for the government to actually introduce a law so that commercial images which have been doctored in any way are legally required to carry a logo, letting viewers to know that they've been digitally altered.
Well, here to discuss all of this is Charlie King, a reality star and body image campaigner. Very warm welcome to the programme. You were on The Only Way is Essex.
I was, yeah.
And how was that experience in terms of trying to conform to a perfect body image, and how have you felt the pressure throughout your career?
I think, luckily, back then, there wasn't actually the social media and the pressures that there seem to be today, because we were like the first show of its type. And there was no Instagram back then, it was Twitter. So even though people were quite vocal, there wasn't so much bombardment of imagery. And we were portraying a certain lifestyle, which obviously was trying to show the beautiful people. And people were loving it, and it was quite aspirational, and it was fun. But I think what's happened over the years is it's become a lot more of a serious issue, that people take what they see on board very literally, and they try and emulate it, and it becomes this thing where you think that's the normal. I need to look like that in order to be seen as popular, attractive, manly, feminine, whatever.
And we see, you know, the Mail Online, of course, they call it, I think, the sidebar of shame, with all the sort of celebrities and what they've been. And we think of Katie Price. I mean, I've lost count of the number of surgical procedures that she's gone through to try and sort of keep ahead of the curve. And you wonder why, when she was actually a very striking-looking woman originally anyway.
Yeah, this is why I want to share my own story, is that from the outset, I was quite aware of the pressures of what seemed to be popular, and you get thrust into the limelight, for example, and people are celebrating you for a moment, and when that starts to dry up, or you start thinking that there's other people coming through and there's a comparison, this one seems to be more popular, this is the new kid on the block, you start thinking, what do I need to do to potentially change? Or how can I stay at the forefront? Because you've been used to something for a moment, and it can really play havoc with your mental health, and it becomes quite dangerous.
But Charlie, we've just been looking at pictures, I don't know if it was from your Instagram or what it was, I mean, you look like a model. And the idea that you've had any kind of low self-esteem is baffling, genuinely baffling to me. And yet you really have, to the point where you've had plastic surgery and you've been disappointed with those results, and would go so far as to say it was not worth it. And I mean, tell us your story.
Yeah, unfortunately, with low self-esteem and lack of confidence and thinking I needed to change has been the biggest lesson that I've learned, and I'm paying the price. I went to see a plastic surgeon because the one thing I never liked was my nose, and I became quite fixated on it, especially in lockdown. I was living on my own. I was looking at all these images on social media, and I thought, if I can just fix that, that's going to make me
everything's
come
going to
back
be all right
with a bang, and I'm going to be confident, and I'm going to get back out there again when we're allowed to, and I'm going to feel limitless. Had the surgery because the surgeon agreed that an improvement can be made. So if you're already walking into a surgeon's office, for example, and they confirm what you're thinking, that was music to my ears. So I was like, sign me up, pay my money, and let's get this done. Without really understanding the risks involved, not understanding that I had body dysmorphia, because on paper I was absolutely fine, but I had this low self-esteem.
And maybe you should have gone for counselling instead of actually a physical procedure. Yeah. So I mean, given what the government is saying it will do, this warning that the image has been doctored, I mean, is that actually going to have any impact when people are in that mindset?
This is a very good question, and I think that the one thing I'm learning about this in the aftermath of my own experiences is that it's very complex.
Yeah.
And the only thing we can do is share our stories. Transparency is key, and for me, the one thing out of this report specifically that was been standing out is that children from the age of 5 to 16, I think they're saying 1 in 6, are already struggling with body dissatisfaction. And I think we need to get in there quick, and I think this needs to be part of education, people understanding what is a doctored image, what is filters, how advertising agencies work and standards, etc., and brands specifically. And so I think if we can make these small steps, hopefully it will dilute what people do deem to be
get people to
seen
step
as what,
back and think about it a bit
There you
more.
go.
So important. Look, Charlie King, what you've done is absolutely amazing in terms of speaking about your own journey, and an amazing role model, and just a reminder that what you see on social media is just superficial, isn't it? And it's only skin deep.
There's a lot more to real life.
There's a lot more to real life.
Yeah. Charlie, thanks for your time.
No, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow morning from 6 o'clock, bright and early.
Yes, and coming up, plenty more politics, of course. It's still the story of the day. Tom Harwood with the briefing for you.
Hello, a very good morning to you. I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a gloomy and in places damp start to the day. A breezy day to come as well, but that breeze coming from the southwest will make it feel humid, and in fact it's going to be a hot day in the southeast. Now, weather fronts have been moving in across northern and central parts of the country overnight, and they'll continue to progress eastwards. They contain a lot of cloud and some heavy rain at first, especially for northern England into North Wales, that continuing through the morning before eventually easing away to the east. Nevertheless, it stays cloudy, it stays breezy, it stays damp in places, particularly northern and western England as well as Wales. Brighter skies for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a few showers in the far northwest where it will be fairly windy here. But towards the southeast, well, avoiding the rain once again, and hot and humid with temperatures reaching the high 20s, even 30 Celsius. Low to mid-20s widely across the rest of the UK. And into Tuesday evening, we keep the cloud, we keep the breeze, and as a result, temperatures aren't going to fall very far on Tuesday night. So a warm, uncomfortable night for sleeping for many. And it will stay damp across northwest Scotland into northern and western England as well as parts of Wales. So we start off Wednesday with temperatures of 18 or 19 Celsius, a lot of cloud cover, again a breezy start, risk of gales for exposed parts of northern Scotland first thing. Through the day, an area of, well, showery rain will push across southwest England, South Wales as well, before moving into the Midlands as well as southern counties of England. Not a great deal of rainfall associated with this, and to the far southeast it stays very warm, 28 Celsius. Cooler for Scotland and Northern Ireland, temperatures back towards 18 to 21 Celsius. And Thursday and Friday we'll see that cooler air spread to all parts, but it also turns drier and brighter with just some scattered showers, mainly in the north.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.